Hi folks, it's time for another pack review. So we have the Spoils of War released about a week ago, and we are back with Stephen Patane, who is the lead designer, for another review. Hello Stephen.
Hello, how's it going? Excited for this one.
Yeah, so last time we did As High as Honor, and as usual I would like to start with a quick look back to see how that worked out.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that was a long one, right? It took
Oh,
something like 8 months to develop, and then I'm
man.
not sure if it's entirely successful. It's probably not the strongest pack, I would say. Would you agree with that?
No. Oh, 100%. I would say that the in-faction cards, I think, did quite well, or most of them. But the neutrals, I think, were slightly below what we wanted in the end. But, you know, there's always room for future improvement.
Yeah, I think the development for that one was problematic because we had worries that the airing cards would make for a single deck basically that worked with any faction in the same way, and then you had 40 cards at least, and all you got from that was basically a single deck, and that was not really the way to go. So the philosophy was changed halfway through the design process, and then now all the cards, some of them pretty decent there among the neutrals, but there isn't really an airing deck that has come out of them. So I think that's something
Yeah.
that we probably need a bit more support if there is another pack focused on this trait, I guess, in the future.
Yeah. I think realistically, the only thing that would have made these cards feel a bit better to me is if we had a lot of the neutral cards, if we had bumped it up by one strength. I've noticed, I've looked at a lot of them, and I feel like they would be a lot more playable if they were just one more strength. So maybe that's something that we can work with in the future.
Yeah, I think there was some concerns, right? Because Ghost of High Heart in an
Mm.
all neutral deck was giving everyone
Hmm.
+1, and then some versions of the agenda also, I think, dealt with strength. Well, the finished one does as well, but it boosts loyal characters now, so
Hmm.
it's kind of weird. Let's say it's not ready to be played yet. There was one deck that was played during the World Cup that was really strong, Lannister, Banner of the Falcon deck, but other than that, it's yeah, I guess the
Mm.
+1 strength doesn't really win games, right? But
No.
the thing that I like that gives it some hope, I guess, for the future is the -2 initiative, because that was basically a big theme of the Erin pack, but having 0 initiative, there isn't really a huge bonus at the moment, but if there was something that really made it worth it, then this minus modifier here can basically give you a lot more options, right? You don't need to play
Yeah.
plots that have printed 0 initiative. You can expand that list of plots that are playable with such an effect, and I think the fact that this agenda can pretty uniquely do this, there's maybe one or two other cards that have this minus modifier only in the game, I think gives it some hope for the future that it could eventually become stronger than it is now.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, and then let's have a look how our picks went for this one. So we picked our favorite
Yes.
cards, and
Yeah.
so for me, the in-faction card, so we picked one neutral and one from the factions, was the Warden of the West. And I
Yeah.
have to be honest, so after the pack was released, I had really limited time, and yeah, I didn't really experiment with a lot of decks. So only until recently I've tested this right in one of the friendly open events. The
Yeah.
idea was that I would play Banner of the Kraken and get those scouting vessels, get 3, or if I combine them, something like 5 cards on a single pillage trigger, and then this would draw 5, right? And I was
Mm.
really optimistic. I played 4 games in testing, won all of them, and then I thought, okay, let's see how it goes in the event, and then I lost all 4 games in that one. I think it was my worst friendly open event ever. So in the end, did not work out. But one thing that I noticed, I actually got the combo draw in most games. I drew at least 3. I drew 5 at some point in some games, and
Yep.
that part works, but the deck doesn't work, unfortunately. The card itself is still kind of interesting. I think it's still a good card, right? It's not only the
Yeah.
draw, it gives renown, gives the commander trait,
Yep.
but the targets, if you want to do the pillage combo, Lannister lords don't really focus on that except for Tywin, so I struggled a bit, but yeah, so slightly disappointing, but I think it's not hopeless for the future, so I'll keep trying with this one.
Yeah, I see it. I actually see it gaining some value in a deck alongside the two of the Lannister cards being released in the Spoils of War.
Yeah, so we'll have a look at that shortly. And the neutral one I picked was Maester Coleman. I thought he could, the dominance action to, let's say, if there's a Milk of the Poppy, to completely change the game state by blanking one of the opponent's characters is pretty decent. But I thought also, since he's a generally useful neutral, unique Maester that maybe any deck that could play out with would benefit. In the end, I didn't really play him all that much, so don't really have much to report here. Yeah, so the cards you picked were
Yes.
Traitor's Whisper and Sweet Robin, so happy with those?
I think so. So Trader's Whisper, I've gotten a lot of use out of lately, and it definitely has still lived up to my expectation. I still just love how that card works, and I've actually really been enjoying it with Assault from Shadows. To be honest, chucking an 8-cost Lord Anders Host into Shadows and then bringing it out for 2 just feels really great.
Yeah, I bet it
Um,
does.
Sweet Robin, I haven't played around with as much, but I'm still quite excited for him. But I guess I haven't really found anything exciting enough for me to build a deck with. So I guess I still want to see him played. I still want to try him out a little bit more. I guess similar to what you said, I just haven't had much time to, experiment with deck builds outside of what I'm usually used to. I did chuck one or two copies of him in with any deck that was using Heir to the Iron Throne, just because, for obvious reasons, he's a very cheap lord for that reason. And yeah,
Yeah, I think we also mentioned Sweet Robin as one of the potentially problematic cards. And I think a
yes,
lot of people were really optimistic, right? When they saw Sweet Robin, they could do something great with it. But then it turns out that, okay, the initiative value comparison doesn't always work out, and the limit once per
yeah,
phase means you can't just do it all the time. However, there was a
yes,
deck recently posted just today, actually. I can show it to you. That is a milk combo kind of with Nightwatch Banner of the Rose that does amazing work with Sweet Robin, who just removes a bunch of cards from the game and then combines it with Golden Grove, Standing, Queen's Crown. It's a really, let's not call it a fun deck, right? People dislike it very much, but it's a really creative deck that I like a lot. I like the concept, and it turns out that he can do some work in the right circumstances, although not exactly problematic. I think Golden Grove is really the problem in this particular one. And also plays
yes.
a copy of Benjicot, this deck. That was my pick as the problematic card. I thought at some point someone will find some kind of infinite stand with Benjicot, and then players will just be forced to either discard or draw a bunch of cards, and it could end up in some kind of mill combo, but that really hasn't worked out so far.
Hmm. I'm just trying to see if there's a way that you can stand with Golden Grove here. Might just be missing it. Oh yeah, I guess Origin. Yeah, just standing Benjigot to try to use it as much as possible. I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't have a limit, so as many times as you can stand him, he will trigger, but
Of course. Yeah.
not as good as standing locations, I think. The one you picked was Cranogman as a potential problem, but I would say
Oh,
I've not heard anything bad about Cranogman, really.
yeah. No, very very wrong on that one. I did see quite a bit of Stark Shadows on first release of the High Honor for some obvious reasons, with both the Wolf's Den and Cranachman being shadow cards. Yeah, no, I can just say that, yeah, that was just flat out a bit more concerned about that than initially. I think it's actually at the right level, in my opinion, because it's like it's still a 4 for 4 Bicon at its worst case scenario. Obviously, with Shadow 3 at its worst case scenario, um, it's just not dominating as much as I was concerned it would be. I guess with any more support to Stark Shadows, it could maybe get to that level, but likely not.
Yeah, seems pretty fair to me, and not really been a problem. Yeah, so most of this pack basically is decent cards have been played. I guess some need some more support, right? We thought in testing that Torken Square, yeah, had to be changed a few times because it kept winning just with some mill and corpse like stuff, and now no one really trying that out. So I think that has been nerfed to the extent that it needs maybe some more support to make it playable. Actually, we have some Greyjoy Shadows in this pack, which we will get to shortly. And
Yeah,
as for the card that is played the most, or is I would say the winner, I guess, of this as high as honor pack, maybe the Halfman's Horde. We saw
yeah,
it in Clansman that just won the online worlds, and in
yeah.
Many-Faced God. Such a great card to have on top of the death pile as well. It gives you assault and intimidate, and no attachment, so any negative attachment control that you are likely to face, just get rid of it with the agenda trigger. And I think that's probably had the most success of any card in as high as honor, I would say.
Oh, 100%. When I saw, because due to my time zone, I sort of didn't do too well at World and then went straight to sleep. Waking up to see that it wasn't a Martell Knights of the Hollow Hill that won, and instead just something interesting. And then seeing that Harpman's Horde was actually utilized quite well. I loved it. I was so excited. A lot of people I know with the way that this card was designed, it went up and down quite a few times in regards to strength, and then the way that it ended up, I knew there were a few people that were a bit disappointed. I'm glad that they got to see that it actually isn't that bad. Even with Many-Faced God, even just giving it an intrigue icon and then standing and reusing them with something like what's it called?
Painted Dogs.
Painted Dogs. That's it. Uh, Even just using that is great. But yeah, of course, getting it on top of your dead pile is probably a little bit better.
Yeah,
Um,
we've seen it
yeah.
with the Prince that was promised agenda as well. So playing a deck that
Yes.
plays this and Tyrion, and actually the Halfman's Horde is named as the Prince rather than Tyrion, which I thought was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so one last thing that I would say again about this expansion. So we had that mechanic, right, with contributing strength that had a bunch of cards at the start. Now it's only really Anya, Waynwood, the Eerie, and the attachments. Lord Protector of the Vale are the
Yep.
only three cards, and they were they went from broken at the beginning of the design process that made it super easy to win challenges or control the board in some way, right, with Anya, because she could also kneel opponent's characters. And then they were kind of over nerfed, and I gave up on them. But the other day, or I should say probably a few weeks ago now, I played it in the friendly open. I played the Baratheon Banner of the Falcon deck that tried to manipulate challenges with these cards. So it played Jousting Contest twice and then Grand Melee, which
Mm-hmm.
we know they work great with the Red Keep in Baratheon, but I also added these cards and it kind of worked. So I'm a bit more optimistic about this now because it made it super easy to push challenges through with Jousting Contest and Grand Melee. You could just attack with a single character. And I tried the Eerie, so the Eerie is
I actually
ridiculously... go ahead.
I saw those games as well, and I was very impressed. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the Eerie is a bit overcosted, right? So 5 cost and it provides some strength, but if it's a small board, it's not nearly enough. And even that impressed me in one of the games. So I played against Knights Watch Builders, which are incredibly strong, of course, in defending power challenges. And somehow I ended up with the board of Bastard of Robert. I had 3 copies in play, and I think I had 3 Galtown merchants. So 6-1 strength characters, and I attacked with them on power, and builders couldn't defend it because the Eerie just added 12 strength, which I thought was a fun little moment. So I'm not completely giving up on this. I think it has some potential, but it could, of course, use another card or two to support it further. So I would be interested in seeing this mechanic revisited, because we did bother with that FAQ entry and all the rules interactions, right? And it's just 3 cards, so maybe a few more wouldn't hurt.
Oh yeah, I'd be happy to see more contributing strength cards, even outside of Aaron a little bit, as long as it makes sense. And yeah, and I know with cards like the Eerie, for example, obviously all the House Aaron cards, one of the biggest issues that we had was balancing it with, ironically, with the event called As High as Honor. So there will always be that concern in the back of my mind that if these cards become too efficient or too useful, that it then immediately tips over into the problematic realm because there's that event. But maybe we were being a little bit too scared of the potential here and brought it down to, an unplayable level. So I guess it's a lesson for next time.
Yeah, it's always a worry, right? Because if you have Littlefinger and this in hand, you just you save so much. It's such a huge cost reduction for that. And of course he comes in standing. And Littlefinger actually did also feature in that deck of mine, and it was fun to play the little mini game with naming the card types, and I think I hit every time, so I stole a bunch of power, so it's kind of fun. Okay, so anything else you want to say about the previous expansion, or should we move on to the Spoils of War?
Let's get to the nice new cards.
Okay, so we have the release article, which I will show you here. I will link it in the description of the video, so you can have a look yourselves. And so this is a really well written, interesting text that I enjoyed reading, and a few cards that are highlighted here, but also, of course, as usual, there's the files that you can download, print at home, or have them professionally printed. And yeah, so I will let you introduce the pack, Stephen.
Yes. So this is the Spoils of War. It is it's been marked as the sort of last of the major support for armies and commanders and war-related themes, I guess. And more specifically, it's here to provide both support for that and counters for that. Sort of like the Spoils of War. It's the end of it's after everything it's the aftermath of the wars. And we've also tried to sprinkle, as the release article does say, we've tried to sprinkle a little bit of anti-shadows in there as well, just as that's something that we want to introduce a bit more in faction. I think I mentioned in this High as Honor video, potentially, that we were sprinkling a little bit of anti-shadow into the neutral cards, and this pack here we wanted to do a little bit with the in faction. Not every faction, but we're going to expand on that slowly in the future. Yeah, this I'm really happy with how this one turned out, especially like the artworks as well. And yeah, I think let's just get into it. I reckon.
Yeah. So we'll go through all the cards. Let me just say, of course, that I think 4 months for this one, if I calculated correctly, which is a much quicker pace, and I am a little bit more excited about this one. So nothing against the Skies of Honor, but neutral cards not really that popular with me, so I prefer the in-faction stuff, and this one offers a lot more of those. And yeah, we have something for every faction here, 3 for each faction, and then we have some neutrals. And what I want to say, so for each card, let me show an example. We've tried to, of course, post this rules FAQ on ThronesDB, so in case you have a question, you can check here, and some, I would say probably most, will be answered in some way, but if something is not covered, do let us know and we'll try to edit.
Yes.
Okay, so I guess we could start with neutrals, since those are the cards that everyone can use. and let's see what we got. So we have King's Landing mob. So we won't be rating the cards. We won't be giving them a rating. We'll just talk a bit about what you can do with them and maybe some insight from the design process. And so this one is a non-unique army. I guess originally was supposed to be the neutral equivalent of those 8-cost armies with the salt, right?
Yes, yeah. And initially, it had a really interesting design of being 8 costs, but also being heavily reduced based on your, I think it was your reserve, and it would have it was a very similar. The ability itself was quite similar to what it is now. And although that was quite exciting, it was also very broken. Essentially, being able to assault anything and then get rid of it on its own, and you're not spending that much for the card either. And so eventually, we narrowed this down to what was important. And this card here is actually a very good example of something we did try to push a bit more in this pack, which you may notice, is simpler abilities. We did notice that in as high as Honor, and I think the previous pack or two, some of the abilities, the text boxes were quite filled up with all these intricate little abilities and things that you can do. We tried to keep it as simple as possible in this pack. It's obviously still, some wordy abilities, but if it's going to be a wordy ability, it's just one thing. It's not going to be too crazy. Mostly to help, those in-person tournament scenarios where there's a judge who has to read the intricate details of that card to understand the ruling. We want to get rid of that. So this is a really good example of that, because initially it was doing quite a lot, then we slimmed it down to what mattered, and I think it turned out to be a really nice 4-for-4 Bicon.
Yeah, so the cost means you can get 3-cost locations of this. So the big 5-cost locations are still safe, and the 4-cost as well. Those are generally tend to be pretty useful. And yeah, the cost of killing this card, of course, now I think it was originally unique as well, but thematically King's Landing mob was I think better as a non-unique character, and now the cost not so damaging, right? If you have to kill one, you can still play other copies if you have them in your deck.
Of course, yeah. Notably, you can still trigger this reaction on other assaults. So if you do have those 8-cost armies and you kneel the 5-cost locations, you can then kill King's Landing mob to discard those locations. It's just on its own; it can only hit 3 or lower, which I think is a good safeguard here.
Yeah, so one thing I wanted to ask about this artwork. So there's a weird severed head at the bottom right corner. What's that about? Whose is that?
The hand itself. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not actually sure. This artwork here was one that we got quite early, and it's fittingly we also made the quote sort of fit the artwork as well. The edge of the artwork is what you see there. we don't actually know who's. I'm assuming it's just a random King's Landing mob peasant. So no one important there, from what I can see. But yeah, pretty much what you see there is what we had with the artwork. This one was stretched quite thin, I would say.
Okay, and then speaking of artwork, so we have former champion, which is
beautiful artwork,
which is amazing. So this one is doesn't really fit with the second edition, but it is a champ card, so we wanted to keep the. I can show you the original card. I have it here. So this was the first edition card. Unfortunately, I can't show you a bigger image here. This is as big as it gets. So it was a first edition champ card designed by one of the world champions, Tsumain Chen, hopefully I'm saying that correctly, who actually also designed When I Woke. So this is his other champ card, and it's been kept mostly the same. So some of the language is changed to fit the second edition wording templates basically, and I was going to say the strength and cost actually was changed to fit with second edition as well, but seems like it actually ended up the same. And mostly the ability is the same as well, except as you can see here, the first edition version had deadly, which was a keyword that does not exist in second edition. So that was changed to intimidate, and also swapped around a little bit. So he gains stealth with the power icon now, and intimidate with the intrigue icon. So that was swapped, but mostly it's been kept identical to the first edition version. And okay, artwork aside, actually this is a pretty decent card. I've found. I've played it a little bit in one of my decks, and it's not fast to get to the middle ability here that gives you stealth and power icon. But one trick that you can use is to play it with at the Palace of Sorrows, which sets each character's strength to 3, and then you can immediately get the two icons, Renown and Stealth, which makes it an excellent character.
Yep, yeah, definitely. This one here, the only other adjustment you just missed there was, I believe the first edition version was giving you -2 strength for each power, whilst this one has been adjusted to -1, and that was actually a balancing change. We noticed that it was, as you just said there, it was becoming too quick to get to what we like to call the what was it? It was basically the most powerful moments of this card, which is getting to 3 strength, getting to 1 strength.
Right.
And it was getting quite problematic, that happening over 2 challenges. So, we initially tried to adjust the stats, making it like 3 for 3 or something, and then adjusting the strength levels there. But we actually thought, this is more exciting. How about we just slow it down? And so even though the -1 seems like a buff, it actually isn't, because it means now you're getting to those points even slower. So utilizing other cards such as Palace of Sorrows, or I even saw one crazy person put what's the 2-cost attachment that sets their strength to 1 during challenges?
Yes, Strangler.
Strangler. I saw one crazy person put Strangler on their own former champion, or at least tried to. And like that's fine, because that's at least a combination. So on its own, I'm really happy with how that turned out. And yeah, this artwork is a bit dated. This is a scenario where we sort of had to extract the art from the old card, and we actually utilized a bit of AI upscaling to try to get the quality right, because if we just copied the old image into the new format, it would look all pixelated and didn't look great. But yeah, it's I think it's fine. It's you can't always have perfect art, and at least this keeps the the original champions artwork intact, which I'm happier to do than. I think it's a bit disrespectful to just completely wipe their artwork and do something else.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, so we did the best we could with this one, and considering all that, I'm still happy with how the art turned out. Difficult to get to upscale correctly.
Yeah, and I think the ability is good as well, so it should see play. Even it's a 3-cost knight with printed renown, so even if you ignore the rest of the text, it's still good. But the text, so intimidate is difficult to get to. You need to win a bunch of challenges unless you can manipulate power on characters somehow, which I think mainly only Baratheon really can do. I guess with the Star Recept you have options neutral as well. But the intimidate comes slightly quicker than you imagine if you just read the text, because you will, if you resolve renown first when you do keywords, of course, you will already get the -1 strength and then gain intimidate in that challenge as well. So if you attack with 2 strength, you will already have intimidate basically for that challenge, which is pretty nice. Okay, and then we have one where we don't need to spend that much time on. We have a Vanguard Leader.
The most complex card of the pack.
It's really simple. That's the only one where I could not find anything to write here in the rules FAQ. I tried to do
Ah,
one for every card because if there's nothing, it seems like maybe someone missed it completely. And yeah, but no, there's just nothing to say. This is just so simple, right? It gives the commander trait, which at the moment, okay, a few cards, but really only one, right? The Battle of the Trident agenda, which, to be fair, oh sorry,
yeah.
no, this one is giving yourself options, and especially on icons where armies struggle. So outside of Martell, usually intrigue icon is the weak one for armies. Yeah, just having commanders should help enormously with this agenda.
Yeah, I'm even I'm a real Battle of the Trident fan. Um, I'm actually utilizing this card in Martell itself and chucking it on things like Core Viper. Tricon with Commando and 8 strength. It's pretty great. Um, this one is one of the simplest cards that has got me so excited. I love the artwork that we ended up getting for this. I I like that it can open up Battle of the Trident for any faction now. Obviously, there's still going to be some factions that benefit more when they have better army or commander characters, but it's now available to a lot more factions if they want to utilize it. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah, so that's Vanguard Leader, and
Yes.
then we move on to the Trident
Oh,
itself, which is a card that has been, yeah, people
yeah.
have commented on it a lot during playtesting, and there were huge worries about this permanent +1 claim that is on the
Mhm.
card. Of course, you have to keep it. You have to keep sacrificing neutral locations, which is not that easy. So original versions or previous versions were a bit more forgiving, I guess. But with
Yeah.
this change, I think at the moment I would not worry about it.
No. Yeah, this you know what this card was born out of? When Richard and myself, Richard is Richard Walker, who also leads the design team. We were having a discussion of the initial cards here, and it was born simply of, there's no cards that raise claim passively, probably for good measure. But I wonder if there's something we can do about that. And we thought of this, and I also think it's extremely fitting to end the army era of the last few packs that we've been releasing, where it started with Battle of the Trident and now it's ending with the Trident. I love that. What this card is bringing, being that the first +1 passive claim card, people should be scared, but when you actually try to build a deck around it, it is a lot more difficult than people seem. Especially because the timing of that forced reaction, and I'm pretty sure you may mention this below. The timing of this forced reaction actually makes it a lot more difficult to take advantage of that +1 claim. You can't be golden groving it back to you to immediately negate uh, the movement of the trident. Uh, and yeah, unless if there is something that can happen in the same forced reaction window, you're not getting out of that.
Yeah, I definitely discovered that. So those that watched my efforts in playtesting to play this in Tyrell,
Mm.
that was really embarrassing. So I had that plan. I would play Golden Grow and just take it back, but completely underestimated this forced reaction. So you need to have neutral locations to sacrifice in the first place. Otherwise, you're not getting claim at all, and just it's so difficult to do. You can play King's Landing to get one back each round, but so far I don't think that kind of combo really works. We saw some attempts with Greyjoy to steal opponents' locations and then sacrifice them, but the change to neutral now means that you
Mm.
can't even rely on that really. So I
Yeah,
think at
which
the
which I think
moment,
was still a safe adjustment to make it a neutral only though. I think that's fair.
yeah, I was not that worried, but people did have some success in testing, and of course for the future, I think there are plans, right, Steven, to support this with other cards.
Yes, yes. Where I guess I can reveal as much that we have intentions to introduce the three forks that build the trident, being the red fork, the green fork, and the blue fork. They're currently just in very very early development, so we don't know what it's actually going to be yet. But we know that we definitely wanted to synergize with this, and well, I guess you'll see more about that in due time.
Yeah, so we'll see if this is ever a problem. At the moment, so to get that, there's actually one interesting interaction. To get permanent +1 claim, it can happen if both players are playing it, because you can't pass control
Yes.
to the opponent. It's a unique location, and then both just keep it, which I guess would end in a pretty interesting game. I've not seen it
Yes.
yet. People not really trying to Trident, but at some point, if it gets played more, this will be happening, I think. So it's a pretty unique situation.
Honestly, I'd love to see that game. It's just going to be a battle of initiatives, really.
All right, and then we have an event, Broken Man, which is interesting. So needs you to lose a military challenge, and it's again that same cost, sacrifice a location, which yeah, not that easy to do sometimes, but the reward here potentially worth it. So you can get rid of a character, and this is actually only the second way that I'm aware of to get rid of your own pleasure barge. So you can sacrifice it as the cost, and it's not actually immune to that, which is kind of cute. Someone did mention it to me that okay, maybe this could be a problem in the future. You can just keep sacrificing pleasure barge, and then if you have King's Landing, you can replay it. But the triggering condition, I think here, so you have to keep losing military challenges also, and that's not really completely in your control, right?
Yeah, well, you can lose it on attack, but yeah, it's still if your opponent sees you doing that, they can at least play around it, which is why we thought it was okay. But if it gets use, then that's interesting enough at least. Pleasure Barge isn't something that you don't see that card absolutely everywhere, and if someone's able to have an interesting combo with that, as long as it's counterplayable, which I think it is, then I have no issues with that. Yeah.
Alright, and I guess nothing much more to say about Broken Man. We can check the last one, Battle of the Camps. And yeah, so one thing that those that are really good observers will see here, the artwork is actually has been used before on one of the core set cards for the North. I can show you, which was not really intentional, right?
Yeah, it was noticed very very late, but like if I'm entirely honest, there's a lot of time that gets put into finding and getting permission for artwork, and we also saw that this is quite literally the artwork for Battle of the Camps. It is Battle of the Camps in all sense of words. So at least it's a larger expansion of that artwork.
Yeah, you can see stuff
we
that
weren't
is not
we
in
weren't
the original image here, or not on the
yeah
first image for the North.
yeah. So it's like it is the same, and if we spotted it earlier, we would have had more time to actually find appropriate artwork to fit this. Which honestly is the part that takes. Most packs are delayed because of us trying to find and get permission for artworks. We never want to take artwork without artists' permissions. If we had more time, we may have tried to fix that up. But I think I'm not too upset about it. I personally like to get unique artwork everywhere, but at the very least, it's, as I said, it's an expanded artwork. So it technically has been done before, such as the Brand the Builder High Garden is actually, I didn't notice this until after the pack was released, is technically the same artwork as Rose Road. Not sure if you noticed that one.
Let's have a look.
I did. If you look at it, the Rose Road is in like the bottom right corner. If you compare the two.
All right, yeah, but here as well, right? You can see the whole castle, so it's not really the same.
Yeah, of course. But I noticed that just randomly. I was like, that looks familiar.
Yeah, so the
Yeah.
card itself, the ability, I think some people have compared it with Filthy Accusations, which happens in the plot phase, and people said, okay, Filthy Accusations not really seeing play anymore. So why would you play this where you also need to win a military challenge? But I think it's a decent card. So you have the potential to kill an army if the matchup allows for that, and decent
Yeah.
initiative as well. So the agenda, Battle of the Trident. So the timing here, we should mention that if you
Mhm.
reveal this in the plot phase, go into challenges, you can kneel character or kill an army and then flip into a new plot. But if you do it the other way around, it does not work out. So if you flip into this after claim, you've missed the window basically. So if you're playing this with Trident,
Unless if
yeah,
you can do another military, of course. But yeah.
yes, yeah.
Yeah, no, this one here, as you mentioned, it was compared a lot with confiscation. Sorry, not confiscation.
Filthy
Filthy
accusations.
accusation. Sorry. Uh, but yeah, I think the major benefit here is that 7 initiative. It's essentially, intimidate effects such as this. You want to go first, so this is giving you that on top of a free kneel effect, or potential kill, obviously. This and Broken Men were the two uh, instances of those cards where we wanted to introduce some anti-army tech, where it wasn't importantly where it wasn't only countering armies, where it was still playable, but it became extra powerful when you faced an army. That's one thing we wanted to keep quite clear, and you will see the same sort of pattern in a few other cards in faction cards.
Yes, and we can have a look at them next. So we can start with Baratheon. No reason to change the order this time. And we have one army card here, Sarador Sans Lyseni, which is a smuggler army. So I think last time I mentioned that smugglers were missing an army because they got that attachment, the Prince of the Narrow Sea, I think it was called, that gave the
Yep.
commander trait. And I was thinking, okay, Trident, but there's no smuggler army, so with just one commander you can't really do it. But this is an army, okay, it's not a non-unique chart that you can put a few in your deck and make sure there's one in play. But it is an army and its ability is interesting, so works with some of the smuggler teams. You need kneeling locations, and you have Koran and Sand Mountains who can kneel them. You have Saldor Sun, the 5-cost version, who can kneel locations, and of course you have the Shadow event as well if you want. And
Yep.
this is yeah, kind of like the core Viper, so you can try to get as many as possible and then gain a bunch of power, which no limit, but there is of course a natural limit in how many locations your opponent is likely to play. But I think with basically a substitute for Renown, this is a card that the smugglers needed and will be appreciated.
Yes, yeah. Our core idea behind this card slot was we wanted to give smugglers an expensive card, more specifically something that was 7 cost or higher, because we did note that they already have the 6 cost slot sort of taken up. If you're utilizing, I'm horrible with names today. Is it the
Valyrian's crew.
Valyrian crew? That's it, the Valyrian's crew. And you've also got 6 cost Davos if you want to utilize him. And so we wanted something a little bit more expensive because that 7 cost slot isn't really taken up. And this was it. And we wanted that card to help with a win condition because currently, and I have seen this, a smuggler deck can really kneel out your locations and your board if it gets to that point. Mostly with something like free companies, you can constantly reuse Quran, Seth Mantes, and simply lock out your opponent, but then you can't really win the game. It's difficult to win the game. So we wanted to give that option here with this. And this ability turned out, as I mentioned earlier, a lot more simpler than we were initially going for. And I just love that it also naturally ties in with Assault. really, I feel like this card hit the nail on the head with what we're trying to do.
Yeah, so if you've seen the previous review, I showed you an image of the Spoils of War when it was added to ThronesDB, and actually it was initially named the Royal Fleet, I believe, and the name was
Yes.
changed because I think the didn't really fit with the smugglers that much, right? That was more of a Stannis card, which
Yeah.
this really isn't, to be fair.
Yeah, which technically, Stannis did build up his fleet with smugglers, but we thought uh, it makes more sense if we tie this to an actual smuggler. And we actually had a bit of a vote for what we would change it to, and Salador Sans Lysini actually won out. I think that exact name is mentioned once in the books, but it still encompasses. I think people can understand what it's meant to cover. And I also have to say, I love the artwork on here. This is one of our AI artworks, actually, which we tried to keep to a minimum. Uh, but we did struggle to find ships that were as vibrant as the Lysini are meant to be.
Mm.
Uh, I love how this turned out in the end.
Yeah, I've always been jealous of the Greyjoy warships. They seem to look better in the artwork for some reason than Baratheon ships. But yeah, this one really called for. So looking forward to playing it. And I think
Yeah.
already it has been played well in playtesting, and there was a very successful Bara Smugglers deck in the recent Worlds. So I think this will enhance it. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this develops.
Yep.
And next up we have Sir Gilbert Faring. Okay, this one has a pretty simple passive ability, so one of those pretty simple cards, and went through some changes as well. And I guess you can talk a little bit about that because I'm struggling to keep up with all of those changes sometimes.
Yeah, this was one where, similar to Salador Sans Lysini, we had a general idea that we wanted for this, which was, um, well, it's shown in the quote. So Gilbert Farring was the main one in charge, the main commander of keeping Storm's End held for Stannis. So we wanted to try to encompass that into the current themes that we're working with, primarily with assault, and wanted to make him a decent 4/4 Bicon, where he gets a bonus in those scenarios where there's assaults involved or there's an army involved. We went to various in various different directions. I think at one point we also had like a location protection version where it basically cancelled out assault in some way. Uh, but it was balancing that along with the simplicity that we were also looking for. That we ended up with something like this. We also wanted to have renown in there somewhere without it being, you know, flat out stronger than all the other 4/4 Bicons that we see. And I think this got to a good point where you don't see assault absolutely everywhere, but in those scenarios where you do see it, or if you utilize it yourself, because it does work on attack, then or in defense technically, uh, then he becomes a 4/5 Bicon with renown, which is obviously a good card.
Yeah, personally, I think plus one strength doesn't really impress me. I'm not that kind of player. I don't think strength really wins games that much. But I do agree that the previous version, so the one I remember that worked with Storms, and so you had Courtney and him in play, just turned every challenge into power, and then they both. So Courtney stood, and this guy didn't kneel to defend in the first place, and it was just such a wall of defense that didn't really feel right. And we also thought he was a bit too similar, right? He was basically another copy of Courtney with the same stats, and basically ended up with the same effect on the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, so not my favorite card, but there is one thing. So he is a knight of cost 4, which is always nice. Some of those knight decks you can struggle with their cards being returned to hand with first snow. Maybe not so much these days, but back when knights were popular at some points. And you can make a deck where he has renown, right? If you include a lot of assault. Now Baratheon at the moment has that non-unique assault available on the Holy 100, which is a 7 card. It doesn't really work with knights that well, but one thing I considered, so if you play the Horn of Winter, it's a great card on Gilbert. Now, okay, his cost is only 4, so you're not going to get all the locations, but it does basically give him both keywords. It's as if it gave him renown as well, and I think it's worth it, right? If you play Gilbert, you play some Horn of Winters as well, and I think it's a decent combination.
Yeah, that would it would essentially be paying what 6 cost for a 5 strength Bicon with Assault and Renown, right? That's pretty good.
Yeah, and of course Horn of Winter does stuff as well, which is
if you want to use it, yeah.
Well, other than that, you can always, of course, attack with assault army. So the non-unique I mentioned, the others are the smuggler army also doesn't fit trait-wise, but the King Stannis' host goes with basically decks that focus on power challenges, and Gilbert can easily do that. So yeah. Okay, and the third one is the Dragonstone. Now I have mixed feelings about Dragonstone. I was going to mention it as possibly my favorite card of this pack, but then I played it, I think, was it 2 days ago? Or, yeah, something like that, in the friendly open event where I tried to play these Baratheon cards that put stuff into shadows, and it was a minor disaster, lost all the games, of course, and never really got Dragonstone into play. But the one thing that I got out of that tournament, so there was one game I played against Stark where it was going well, and then suddenly there was Mira Reed in shadows and came out, blanked my Melisandre, the 6-cost one that was about to kill some renowned Stark guy, right? And it was all winter plots and just started the Mira loop, and it happened every round, and I thought, if I just had Dragonstone in play there, right, it would intercept her immediately and she is gone and I win the game from there. So that part, the part that works, just incidentally, basically, depending on the matchup, can be strong. But the part that works with Baratheon cards, still missing a little bit. So we went through some versions here. There was a cost reduction because those events are really costly, which in the end was removed. And then there was one that discarded those cards, but I suggested basically this change to keep them in shadows because of Red Ronet, who, let me show you. So he gets you increased claims if there is a card in shadows, and I thought it might be good to make that happen. So if it's locked, then I don't know, is it worse or better than being discarded? I guess discarded is better in some situations, but then some decks interact with the discard pile and can maybe access that card again, whereas if it's locked, it can be, you basically need control for Dragonstone, get rid of it somehow to get that card back. So I don't know, but I think this way there is some potential, right, for the future. So there are some cards like Sir Jason Mallister, I think, that only work if there's no cards in shadows, and there's a card coming up that we have in Greyjoy here that is the same. But I think Baratheon could become the opposite, maybe if it gets a few more cards that say if there is a card in shadows, or if the losing opponent controls a card in shadows, you get some effect, and then maybe it's worth it, right, to play those events, and you want to keep that card in shadows. Because I also played against Lannister, and there was Lannister Rose, and there was that guy Orton Merryweather, who is just such an annoying card, keeps grabbing that Iron Bank will have his due every time he comes into play and stuff like that. And I thought, let's get this guy in shadows, but then didn't have Dragonstone in play, and opponent went into the challenges phase with 12 gold, and he would just come straight back, which is really annoying. So it's good to have this to support those events, I guess, in some situations.
Yeah, I think what you just said there with Baratheon being a bit opposite to the others, where they get a benefit for cards being in shadows, that is something that we do want to expand on. So abilities similar to Red Ronet, where cards being in shadows is just a massive benefit for you. I think that's the direction we will likely go in for Baratheon, quote-unquote anti-shadows. I say that because you can force the cards into shadows. So yeah, this is a sort of card where I think how it turned out in the end is, I think it turned out quite well, but I do agree that it needs a bit more support. But that was just, in my opinion, that's sort of just the theme in general needs more support. I don't think one card would be able to just magically make it all work. So I'm excited to see that. I'm excited to see what we can come up with in the design team to support that. But that direction is definitely what we're looking at currently.
Yeah, looking forward to it. So in the previous packs, I had my favorite cards were Storm's End and Summerhall, and I knew that I would immediately be able to use those in decks that can fight for tournament wins. And this one I really like, but at the moment it's not going to win me tournaments. But I'm looking forward to seeing what it can do in the future. I think it's a good starting point to get some of those cards played, because those events are kind of forgotten events, right? They're not being played.
Yeah.
Even though they're removal effects that can really swing the game in the challenger's phase, but they're not worth it. And yeah, would be nice to bring them into the game basically with some support.
Yeah.
All right, and then let's have a look at the Greyjoy cards. We have Dagmar Clevejaw, second version of him. And he does have Shadow for that Torrhen's Square potentially, and Pillage. So if there's no Pillage, doesn't really support it that much, but he has both, which is great. And so there is one thing with him. He only works while there is a Winter Plot card revealed, and we've seen Greyjoy pushed into that direction before. I think there's, Fish Whiskers certainly, and Moat Kaelin I think also has that restriction, and it's not really succeeded. Greyjoy doesn't care about Winter that much in the end, but this is another card, and if there is a Winter Plot card revealed, basically cannot be killed, right? So you can get him in the death pile, you can get multiple copies in the death pile, and he can still come out of it. And yeah, other than that, he's just a body, but with good keywords as well.
Yeah, definitely. This one was, I don't really think this card really changed much. I think initially we had Shadow 3, but we thought, if you're going to utilize his ability, you should pay probably the fair Shadow cost rather than it being the same cost as his normal regular cost. But no, this card was pretty much the same all the way through. And you're right, it will directly be playable with something like Torrhen's Square. Even with the winter interaction, I did note, I may have noted this in our last video, how Torrhen's Square can work with Moat Kaelin as well, in some ways, by bringing your opponent's trying to bring everyone down to your initiative level, I guess. It's where you have low initiative, but you can also still win initiative. The thing I like here is that it can work with those cards, but also we wanted to expand a little bit on the winter cards, and I think this with what Dagmar was doing in the story, where he was taking Torrhen's Square, and as the quote says, he's one of the few survivors from all that. We're pretty happy with how this turned out. It's a really thematic card in my mind. One extra thing I wanted to point out, and this is purely from the art team, was this card is another one of the examples of something we had to upscale with AI, and you get some weird artifacts with that sometimes. For example, you see that little guy on the left that is conveniently covered up by that intrigue icon?
Yeah.
He actually doesn't have an eye. We couldn't generate an AI upscale that gave this guy an eye for some reason. And we were like, we have to fix this. It's very obvious. And then conveniently one of us put it on the card. We're like, guys, it's okay. Ironically, the lack of this guy's eye is covered up by the eye of the intrigue icon.
I didn't know.
And so,
that's fascinating.
I'll send you the artwork so you can actually see it and present it on screen.
Okay.
But it's one of those convenient little scenarios where it's you'll never know if I didn't tell you.
Yeah, and we have the captain trait on him as well. So there was what's that called? Foam Drinker, right? Is his ship, And
Yes.
I didn't consider that before, but now that I think of it, so that gives him assault. So we keep thinking about the first version of him, but this guy can gain assault and can gain an icon. So he's missing the power icon. And captains with that Maiden's Bane, for instance, he has stealth, he has assault with this location, and he has pillage. Yeah, he is a guy that you could do some kind of Voltron deck around him, which is very nice.
Yeah, there just needs to be a way for him to gain renown, and then you're good to go.
Yeah, can't think of a very easy way right now, but I'm sure it is possible. Okay, and then we have a more generic card, Harlow Scout, which is just well, I was going to say it doesn't have much of an ability, but it does actually. So you can gain gold if you choke the reserve of your opponent, basically. And since he is non-unique and cheap, you can have multiple of them in play, and then suddenly you go into next round with a few gold as well. Has shadow, doesn't have pillage. And the other thing worth noting, of course, is the House Harlow trait. So we have the location Harlow itself, which just reduces everything, not the first House Harlow, just all the cards, right? So if you have a cheap Bicon character, deck that plays this really needs those cards.
Yeah, this was another one of those cards that really didn't change much. In fact, I think it was identical to our first version of it, except that one of the last minute refinements we did was adding that limit twice per round, which in Joust you won't really notice that, but in Melee we thought it may be a little bit problematic when if the Greyjoy player had 3 Harlow Scouts out and all players had discarded cards. Let's say best case scenario twice a round. That's 9 gold that you're gaining. Not really something we want from a 2-cost card. So we added that limit. Other than that, though, it's a really nice. It's one of the rare cheap shadow cards. Even though it doesn't have that pillage, I still think it's usable in that Tauren Square deck just simply for how cheap it is. And even if you're not pushing those House Harlow themes, discarding cards for reserve is something that happens in the regular game. So yeah, this is a very simple card. I like how it turned out.
Yeah, so we have in the previous pack also what was the Greyjoy non-unique something Septon? I think it was called the Reader's Septon.
Reader's Septon.
Also a House Harlow card, which is interesting. So now they basically have all the icons covered, and they are reduced if you play the Harlow location. But so Greyjoy with the non-unique chads is not strong, right? With the icons, doesn't really have good combinations, and we just have 2 cards here. So one with an intrigue and power icon, and the new one has military and intrigue. But the one thing that keeps them in check, I think, is the lack of traits, because they are looking for sometimes for Raiders, sometimes for Ironborn, of course Drowned God.
Yeah.
And these are House Harlow, which doesn't help the main deck, right? So it's not really, they've not really been using them at the moment, those Septons that I thought would be played a bit more. So I guess we kind of got it right, that they don't just naturally fit, but you need something more for them to be played.
Yeah. I think that we're introducing more options for Greyjoy, because I think we've all noticed that the standard Greyjoy deck of just utilizing all those really strong bombs is a bit overused, in my opinion. So providing more options can only mean more versatility if people want to actually do it.
Yeah. And then we have the Mirishai. So this one I've heard some worries, because it does potentially give, of course, insight to Greyjoy, and Greyjoy has some stand if things go right for them, to have a single character, for instance, participate in multiple challenges. However, it's not guaranteed. So what's your feeling here? How likely is it that you would have insight if you just play this naturally without any shadow control?
I think it's really a coin flip. If you're going into a random game, I'm sure you can chuck one in and probably get some use out of it. But in a tournament scenario, for example, I don't think you're going to be getting through all of your games, without this being kept in check. Uh, its reaction as well is intentionally not as strong as some other anti-shadows reactions. It does obviously give you the, if you are versing someone who has cards and shadows, of course, it is giving you information, which we think is a very important tool to use against anti-shadows. So regardless of what the card is, you get to reveal it and see it, with the added bonus of if it's an event discard. It's similar to uh, the Stark Knight you mentioned earlier.
Sir Jason Mallister.
Unless it says Jason Mallister, that's it. I'm not too concerned. The in development, this was initially a non-unique card. I think that was more just that's what we initially started with, and that was what it was pitched at initially. But then looking into balancing and looking into the actual lore of the card, it made more sense to make it a unique card. This is the one that Victarion Greyjoy had picked up after he raided I think it was a Lyseni ship, a trading ship. So it is a unique it is a unique attachment. So it made both sense mechanically and thematically to switch this to unique. And because of that, I don't really have any concerns.
Yeah, and has the item trait, so can be grabbed by Kregorn. Works with Raider from Pike as well, but that has not seen play since the redesigns. Yeah. Okay, and then we can have a look at Lannister.
Yes.
So this one was very popular in playtesting, Sir Devon Lannister. Just an efficient body with renown and has an ability which is slightly tricky. So with any effects that discard cards, of course, you have that situation where if you actually get your opponent to 0 cards, then you are not getting your Cersei triggers and you are not getting this trigger either. So you have to, opponent has to have a card to discard if you want to trigger this reaction, and then you can draw one as well. So if you're too efficient, it backfires, but realistically, right, in most games, he will just, he's like a renown, has insight, and will discard a card like Gunther, for instance, in a challenge. So for me, pretty efficient.
Yeah. One of our intentions for this card was, Tywin Lannister in the story has proven to be, unlike his father, a lot more of a renowned commander, with a lot more successes under his belt. And so we wanted to translate that into a good, a decent Lord Commander character that can fit in those Trident decks. And we'll see the next card also works quite well with him, both thematically and mechanically. But I even said in the last pack as well that we were looking for potentially having more Lannister Lord characters. This was born partly from that. And I like how it turned out. I think in the scenario where your opponent has 0 cards, if you've managed to lock them into that, then you're probably doing very well anyway. But yeah, I'm honestly excited to see if this can be used in Battle of Trident, along with the next card that we're going to look at here.
Yeah, so another commander. I think they have pretty much as many commanders as all the other factions put together, or at least these unique high cost characters. And actually there was a tournament in Barcelona just recently this weekend where our Stalek champion Haren played Lanny Trident. I don't think this pack was legal, not sure about that, but interesting that is being explored. I think it's been coming for a while with all these commanders coming out for Lannister. So, and there is an army, of course, as well. We have Oxcross Survivors, which inefficient when you just look at the cost to strength ratio, but then has a pretty easy passive ability. So you only need a Lannister Lord or Commander character, and it becomes a 3/4 Bicon with Assault, which suddenly is, pretty efficient.
Yeah, and you know, as the quote of this or the flavor text of this card shows, it's obviously synergizing quite well with someone like Davin, but also can be utilized elsewhere. You know, you can also uh, technically utilize Vanguard Leader. It's one of the combos I was mentioning earlier, where you know other factions can now sort of get into that agenda. This also works quite well with that. Uh, yeah, this is a pretty staple card in any realistically any deck that you have enough Lannister Lord or Commander cards. I can't see why you wouldn't chuck three of these in there. It essentially turns it into a 3 for 4 with Assault. That's great.
Yeah, so they go in different directions a little bit. We can have a look at the commanders in Lannister.
Yeah.
There is Sir Jocelyn Bywater, who works with ambush cards, which this is not, of course. There is Sir Adam, who picks from the discard pile, and we have Jamie, who is kind of anti-jumpers, anti-shadows. So they're not really doing the same thing, but if you have all of them, and we have two with renown here, yeah, I think it makes for a good Trident deck, and there is some access to the Intrigue icon as well here with Jamie, which in Trident, as I said, so that's why I think Martell has been the most successful, simply because
Currently, yeah.
their armies have the Intrigue icon. And is the Tattered Prince a commander?
Yes, he is. He's their only commander.
Right, and he's a Tricon as well, yeah, so they have
Yeah.
way more flexibility. And
Yeah.
yeah, we have
Yeah.
something in Targ later as well with an Intrigue icon, which will be relevant for this.
Yeah. I'm excited to see what people do with this. I like seeing. I'm glad that this final pack sort of rounds it out a little bit and gives a whole lot more options to different factions for this sort of theme.
And the next one we have is a Lannister event, 123,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
has gone through several iterations. It was a
So
pretty
many.
flashy card at some point. Now it's been nerfed, but it has such versatility. It has three completely different options that you can do for one cost, which is not that expensive, especially in Lannister in the Challengers phase. So you can return a card to hand, you can place a card in Shadows. Note here though that it needs to have the Shadow keyword, otherwise it might get stuck. This event will not give it the Shadow keyword if you just put something random in Shadows. Or you can give a card Insight, which can give you a few cards if you use it on one of those non-kneelers that Lannister has, so Cersei or Myrcella, or if you can make something else happen along these lines, of course it will work as well. I've tried it a little bit, but I think it kind of has to go in a deck that can do at least two of those options. So if you have
Yeah.
let's say a Robert Strong, Mendon Moore, and then maybe if you're playing the Harrenhal stuff, Tower of the Hand, and one of those non-kneelers, if you're just focusing on one, then there are other ways of doing that same thing that are maybe a bit more efficient. So, but if you're playing kind of a good stuff deck that can do more of these options, I think this will be a good one.
Yeah. This was initially just for reference. It was initially a 3 cost event that had similar to these options you have here. Actually, only they could target anyone, so it would be like an offensive and defensive card. But one of our issues was that keeping this card simple, which is one of the things I mentioned earlier, was a big thing we're trying to push with this pack. Keeping this card simple and also, you know, keeping the text size down so it's not just tiny. You know, you don't need to print a PDF document to just view this card. Uh, um, that was the biggest struggle with this one. So it's why we ended up deciding to sacrifice the offensive part of this card, but instead focus on just how you can use it on your own and simplifying it to fit that scope. So that's why the cost has been lowered to 1, and the trigger is quite simple. You know, just win an intrigue challenge and have the character participating. It's pretty. The criteria is very straightforward, and it does, even though it's doing 3 separate things, it now does feel like more of a simple card than it initially was.
Yeah, and I think we kind of had to get the flavor right here as well. since it's this is a pretty pivotal moment in the books, right? This Tyrion's scheme, and we had to kind of get the
Yes.
three options to represent those three characters that he interacts with, which I'm not sure if, well, you are limited by the game mechanics, so can't get it exactly right, but there is kind of some logic, right, behind this.
Yeah, yeah. Just for reference, the 1, 2, 3 is Tyrion essentially marking off Littlefinger, Varys, and Pycelle, Grand Maester Pycelle, any scheme to find out who was working for Cersei, and yeah, that's what you're saying there is they're trying to represent those three characters and the abilities that they work with. Both, I guess, the abilities they work with or synergizing with them in some way. With Pycelle having insight, Varys is we tried to work with his shadow version here, and same thing with Littlefinger with his core version.
Okay, and then we move on to Martell, which does have
Yes.
some flashy cards here, but I think the first one not so much. So we have Sir Andre Dalt, who has one of those very simple passive abilities. Each opponent cannot gain power from winning dominance, and I should clarify this. So rules-wise, this just means when you win dominance and you would gain 1 power, you don't gain that, but it doesn't stop the reactions and stuff like that, right? Feast for Crows or Gendry or whatever you have, even Chamber, those triggers still work. But he does, you don't see it in the games, but he does just silently deny you some power. I think I played a game in testing against Ploidos, and then at the end, it was a close game. He informed me this guy basically stole 3 power from you, and you would have won without it. So yeah, you don't notice it, but he does have an effect on the game.
Yeah, yeah. I played tested this one quite a bit, and initially we had he was a version that also had Renown, but we ended up cutting that and eventually gave him Shadow 3 to fit the style of deck that he wants to be in. With the other like Shadow Dawn, we just had it as high as Honor and other cards in that fashion. The biggest way I could describe this card was he brought safety to those decks where you want to be losing dominance, because those decks naturally want to slow down the game so that you can build your cards, get the cards you need, and then just control your opponent. But the issue was to get that engine working, you're actively doing the opposite. You're giving your opponent power each round to then win quicker. So having Andre Dalt there to completely block that off has been, I think, it's a step in the right direction, especially in a very simple ability. There was a design discussion on whether he would be better being a cheaper card, but I think we stuck to him being 4 cost as to not encourage him in any Martell deck. I feel like once you get to the 3 or lower, he can sort of fit anywhere. Whilst if you get to the 4 or higher, you have to actually make a bit more of a deck building decision on whether you think he's worthwhile on the deck. Of course, you'd scale the stats with that as well, but it's more for that, just for that ability alone. What you're willing to pay for it. Yeah, I think this is actually the simplest card. Even I would say maybe even simpler than, almost as simple as Vanguard Leader.
Yeah, I guess 4 cost does have its advantages, right? So it sticks around
Yeah,
a
of
bit
course.
more. And the Shadow 3, okay, he could be just marshaled most of the time, but those decks that lose dominance sometimes do play a lot of shadows with Rihanna Martell, who takes icons, and then you have opponent has standing characters to win dominance, and kind of ties in with that. And yeah, Night Raid as well. Some Martell decks do like that.
Yeah, very simple card.
And
Speaking
then,
of simple cards,
okay, so this rule is if you don't get scared, it's just mostly saying the same thing, right? It's describing exactly what he works with and what he doesn't work with.
yeah,
It's a bit of a nightmare if you're just reading this for the first time. But yeah, we went through a lot of discussion on this guy. There were worries. I was actually one of the people that were worried about the original or the previous ability. And slightly jealous of him actually, because he does more than Dragonstone. He works with cost as well, basically most things, and works with not just shadows, of course. He works with returning cards to hand, which some effects do when the opponent uses them, so Misty Morn and stuff like that, you can interrupt that, but of course Martell has tricks of their own, right, to make that happen, and suddenly this guy is a nightmare to face.
Yeah. He's our initial. This is one of the cards that's fitting the anti-shadow slot that we're looking for. But we also obviously knew that, similar to what I said earlier with the anti-army tech, we wanted to make sure he was usable in scenarios. He wasn't only playable in scenarios where you're versing shadows decks, right? So that's where it interacts with one of the core Martell mechanics of returning your opponent's cards to hand. Uh, he, I think our initial version of him essentially did the same thing, except the cost was kneeling. And we eventually landed on this version. You were part of that discussion, obviously. Yeah. Where it at least means you can get him into play multiple times, but you're usually going to have to pay for him each time you want to have that ability available. But whilst it is available, it is quite a hefty price. But I do, as a Martell player, I do know that Return to Hand has struggled for quite a bit. A lot of the time, it's making that Return to Hand uh, a permanent setback, which is what Kago tries to do here. And although we did need to get quite meticulous with the FAQ here to make sure we, cover every basis, he is actually pretty straightforward in how he works. That FAQ is more just to, make sure in those very niche scenarios what he is actually doing. If there's any ruling questions, it's going to be in there. So yeah.
Yeah, I think Sir Davos Seaward, so the core one, is a card to study if you want to really understand. So it's basically the same thing. It stats instead doesn't really elaborate, but it means instead of where this card is going, it's going to be placed in shadow. So only the location is changed basically. And, that's pretty straightforward, but it does provide some problems. So at the end, I have here. An infinite loop is possible, of course. If there's two in play, they can keep interrupting one another. So anytime you can interrupt a cost, we have that scenario with Sir Meryn Trent and Drowned God Fanatic as well, where Drowned God Fanatic can keep interrupting Sir Meryn Trent, who then keeps trying to remove him from the game. And because Drowned God Fanatic does not leave the area where it's triggering from, it just can keep triggering again and again, and two Kagos can kind of do the same thing. And I think this needs to be, and hopefully will be, addressed basically at the core of the problem, to either deal with how these loops are resolved, because we don't have a ruling on this from FFG, or it's going to stop the loops from happening, because the reason they happen is because you can interrupt costs, right? And then you can try to pay those costs again during that nested sequence that creates, which is kind of unintuitive and maybe should be prevented. So that was one of my suggestions to stop that from happening altogether. That would resolve actually both of those scenarios, the Kagos and the Drowned God Fanatic problem.
Yeah, and this is another example of those cards where we saw this potential problem coming up. But our options were either, build in a safeguard into the card itself to prevent that problem, which would in turn make the card honestly too complicated, especially for the average player who doesn't understand the very, very intricate rules that they don't need to understand. Or we leave it as simple as it sort of is now, and have that ruling actually addressed properly, or more specifically, even clarify it in the FAQ, which is something we would prefer to do if we can keep the simplicity of that ability. And although Kago could maybe be worded a little bit simpler than it currently is, we didn't want to go any we didn't want to go any far further beyond this. Sorry, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I
In
think
regards to complexity.
there was a way to
Um,
word him even in an even more complicated way to get it absolutely right in what this ability is actually doing. But yeah, we
yeah,
read that out loud to ourselves after I wrote it, and it was just a disaster, even though it was correct. So I think this is
exactly.
as good as it gets.
Yep.
Now, what about the ability itself? So, okay, immediately you think first snow is happening, and then I'm going to just kill
Yeah.
something that way, or the father, since you can. He is unique,
Yeah.
so you can choose him, and you can choose Tywin Lannister on the other side, and then Cargo
Yeah.
interrupts, goes to hand anyway, and Tywin ends up dead. So that's the one thing, right, that immediately springs to mind. You
Yep.
think it's strong, it's worth it, or not so
I
much?
think I think it's I think in any deck that you're going to have Kago and any of those sort of abilities, you will have at the very least one copy of the father. You can have first snow as well, as long as it still works in your deck. But I'm less concerned about Kago being used with first snow to kill a 3-cost character. Um, that's less of a concern. But the father, I can understand the power level there, and realistically, if it does end up becoming that much of a problem, that can be dealt with restrictions. It was much harder to build a card here that would work normally, except for with the father. It's just not really possible because of how that ability works. So I think it's okay being in there for now, but if it becomes a problem, it might just need to be addressed later on. But if you're not running the father with Kago, then you're not doing it right.
Yeah, I think those interactions tend to be sometimes a little bit overestimated. I think because you're
Yeah,
already removing the card, and then okay, you can kill it as well. It's like kind of like Baratheon kneeling something, and then you play public execution, right? It's since it's
yeah,
already knelt, you're kind of controlling a card that is already controlled. So in that sense, it's not so strong. But I think the same with Kago, for instance, if you play pinch of powder and stuff like that. Okay, that's already the hit opponent is suffering by having a good character return to hand, and this just you need to return yours as well then to put it in the dead pile. And sure, it's going to be worth it in many scenarios, but sometimes it doesn't make that much of a difference, I think.
no. And one very small benefit here is that he is also a commander, as he is the second in command um, the Windblown, along with second in command to the Tattered Prince himself. So yeah, another Battle of the Trident card maybe. He does technically work quite well with Lord End as host, so maybe that's a different deck I think than what I currently have. But yeah, also AI art generated by a really talented artist there.
Yeah. Okay, and speaking of art, this was a bit of a nightmare, right? The War Scorpion was one of the
Yes,
last minute solutions that we found after long periods of struggle with this one.
yes, I struggled with this for quite a while. We surprising how little artwork there is of like large ballista weapons that isn't already in a card game. Like I know Gwent, for example, has a lot of really nice looking ballista that we just can't use because obviously it's it's a different game. Um, but this one was a bit of a last minute guy finally responded to me, and I think it still fits quite well.
Yeah, so the card itself, of course,
Yeah,
is a bit complicated. So if you just consider it two cost attachment that gives plus to strength, it's already something. So even if you are not using the ability, but the ability can win games. So you
yeah,
can remove a character from a challenge, an attacking character, which I guess towards the end of games where you're likely to lose it or to use it, I should say, it can make a big difference. Or if you need a particular challenge where you can't afford to lose, and comes in as a surprise as well. But of course, the bonus here we have anti-army again, and this one also adds dragon, which is interesting. So
yeah.
one person mentioned the other day that it's yet another card that Many-Faced God can exploit just by giving characters the traits that are not supposed to have. So that's another problem there. But this one does sacrifice itself, and grabbing attachments back from the discard pile not so easy for Martell, I think. So I think it's not that dangerous, right?
Yeah, and one thing that I think I noted for the person that had a bit of concern there is realistically the root of the problem is MFG there, is Many-Faced God. It's breaking a lot of unintended combos that I think realistically that needs to be addressed. And we actually did see that combo, the potential combo during development here. But in a similar vein of Kago, we decided that it's better to keep this card how it's intended and balanced how it is. And if it does become an issue, one that can be dealt with via restrictions, but two, realistically, you need to get to the root of the problem, which is Many-Faced God itself. So
yes, I would agree
if
with
it does
that.
become a problem, that's something for GOT to deal with, for the global operations team to deal with later on. But yeah, I did actually notice in playtesting someone utilizing this Many-Faced God and King's Landing Mob actually, because it's got a built-in kill effect to get that army on top of the deck. Someone was doing that, and that was quite efficient. But again, that's in my opinion, Many-Faced God. So yeah, a card on its own. The card on its own is quite useful. 2 gold, as you said, 2 gold for 2 strength is already fairly good. I think the surprise element with ambush is what gives it. It's what makes it playable, like actually worthwhile, in my opinion. Because if you see this on the board, your opponent simply just doesn't fall for it. A smart opponent will just simply say, "Oh, he's got this. I guess I just won't attack with my army or dragon," which is still good, but it loses a lot of its power if it's just easily seen there. So having that ambush there, I think, allows it to be a bit more of a Martell card, where it's a surprise element rather than just a form of prevention.
Yeah, I'm thinking, could you do some kind of loop? You can do it with Edric, right? But then you need to give it the shadow keyword, so you need Doran as well. Yeah, it's a bit too many pieces, but yeah, if you could make it repeatable, the remove part is pretty strong. If it was repeatable,
Yeah.
but it's just not, unfortunately, or fortunately, I should say. I think Martell is already annoying enough with their attachments, especially that stupid venomous blade that just keeps killing all the chards I play.
Yeah. Yeah. This one we didn't want this to repeat. Fair as a one-off. Sort of.
And next up, we have Night's Watch.
Yes.
We have Iron Emmet, which is an
Yeah.
interesting card.
The guy with my favorite quote in the pack.
Yeah, so the first thing you notice here, of course, is military icon with stealth, which immediately means he works with Divan. Let me just show you in case you've forgotten, since Divan is not played that much. So he can do a military challenge, free one basically, without kneeling. But on the other hand, you might want him knelt, because his ability, of course, works while kneeling, and it will stop some decks very annoyingly. So it basically forces clansmen to just do all of their triggers, all the surprises immediately before you can kneel him. Otherwise, he just stops it completely, and it's passive, so it's not going to be cancelled by all the Lannister cancel, which I think is pretty decent. But even if the passive does nothing, right? So he's still a 4-cost Bicon with stealth, which is fair enough.
Yeah, this was one of the cards, and you may notice a bit of a theme here. I know you were part of the design process, so you understand this. We did want to introduce some more 4 cost characters in certain factions that didn't have it, with an extra bonus if they were able to, like this card here, if they were able to be a bit anti-shadows or anti-jumper in some way. And Iron Emmet hits that. You may notice as well that there are quite a few, similar to Jason Alistair, as we mentioned earlier, who gain renown conditionally based on something stealth related, or really based on a condition in general. Like there's quite a few now. And you'll notice that Iron Emmet doesn't have that. We actually had a discussion, and realistically, all those conditional effects were all for renown. And I think realistically, a 4 for 4 Bicon with renown is quite strong, but not all keywords I think are equal, really. Uh, Stealth is probably a little bit less useful on a 4 for 4 character, probably more useful on a like a 2 cost character. So in this scenario here, I think we were happy with giving printed stealth and an ability that can really work, but as you just mentioned there, it luckily does have a really clear form of counterplay with, rather than just blocking your opponent out, it means that they kind of have to do it before Emmet is kneeling for to be able to do what they want to do. But they're not, they still have an option there in most cases. So we're pretty happy with how that balanced out, but only time will tell if we hit the mark right.
Yeah, and I think the aggressive Rangers type of deck in Night's Watch maybe not played as much these days, so nice to see some more support for it.
Yeah.
Then we have support for something completely different here. We have the Shadow Tower, which basically only works in decks that, the 6-cost wall decks, basically, that steal characters from your opponent. It gives every one of those characters +1 strength, and also has an ability that is not completely, of course, in your control. Lots of games, surely, where you just cannot trigger this at all. Or if it does find a Shadows card, of course, it's not going to be a non-unique character. Still, it reveals it.
Yep.
But some games, I know in playtesting I had Shadow Priestess, and this thing, of course, I forgot completely that it's in play. It just triggered, and then it triggers the Come Out of Shadows reaction as well, which is pretty strong. A lot of the cards, the non-unique cards that are in Shadows, will have some kind of reaction. And it's interesting. And we also discussed if it should be optional or not. As you can see, it just says if it's a non-unique character, put it into play. It doesn't give you an option to decline it. So there's one card I think I found. I had a look through all of them to see if I could list another example. But it's just the Bolton Flare is the one that stands out. If you reveal this against Stark, if you reveal their card in Shadows and it's Bolton Flare, probably you're not going to want to have that in play, right? Most of the time, I would guess.
Yeah, most of the time. I mean, you still have control over what it kills, so if there are equal costs, then you're good. But yeah, in a general sense, this card was similar to the Mirror Shy. We knew that the action itself wasn't always going to be, triggerable, but even just 2 cost for the +1 strength and the ability to reveal the cards and shadows, we thought that was enough for 2 cost. That's enough value with the added bonus of, if they're non-uniques, you obviously get to take them. There was also a discussion of this being utilized with Baratheon, wasn't there? Try to tuck those cards into shadows.
If you use the Baratheon events, and then you can take it. That's interesting. Yeah, I completely forgot about that. That would be interesting to try. Now, the Baratheon events themselves at the moment, pretty questionable, but it's an interesting twist if you wanted to steal them in a 2-card combo like that. Yeah, could be done.
Also, real quick, I'm glad there's a Shadow Tower that actually interacts with Shadow now.
Yeah, maybe we could get visited by shadows to do something useful as well.
Maybe.
Yeah, I was going to say the +1 strength obviously is super weak on one characters, but they do tend to have a few stolen those decks. So if you can get a few of your opponents, then it makes it worth it possibly. Or maybe not, not sure, depending on the situation. Some of the time, of course, those decks, just by stealing cards, will already gain such an advantage that a little bit of strength will not matter that much. And then we have Defending the Wall, which is long text, but it's really simple actually. So if you're defending the wall, you can remove a character which a lot of the time will make a difference between an opposed or a non-opposed challenge. So in wall defense, really strong. And I guess you could use it outside of that as well, although there is the restriction, right? Castle Black or the wall which not all decks will play. But I think this is kind of a Night's Watch offer of a pitch card, right?
Yeah, and this is again another example of that anti-army tech, but similar to the War Scorpion out of Martell, has the added benefit of also working with wildlings, which thematically makes complete sense. Where if it's an army or wildling, it's just going to be it's going to stay knelt when you after you remove it. But if it's otherwise, it's going to stand and move. It's similar to Offer of a Peach. Yeah, there were concerns about this initially, but I really think that it ended up quite fair, especially with that passive condition. There will be scenarios where someone's going to play a defend the wall deck and they are going to play defending the wall, and it's going to probably define a game or two. But I think that's honestly fine. We need to support all themes. We just hope that we get the mark right and we don't get it too problematic. And I don't think this falls into that realm.
Yeah, the events basically are not repeatable by default. You can make them repeatable in some ways, in some factions, but just having 3 of these that can be played potentially 3 times during the game is not problematic. Now, one thing that is problematic that a couple of people have reported, apparently it crashes the server on the Iron Throne at the moment if you try to play this, so some kind of problem for you to fix, I guess, in the near future.
I've already fixed it. We're waiting for it to be pushed to live.
Okay, good man. Okay, so then we have Stark, which actually is possibly, I said the other day that it was the winner of this pack in terms of the cards they got, especially the last 2. So we're starting with King Rob's Bannerman, which is a 6-cost army with assault. That is the first card that breaks that rule, right, where you can only assault 1 location. This one can assault 2. Now that's very situational, right? So a lot of the time even a single assault will not have anything worthwhile. I've had people assaulting my Rose Roads and stuff like that in the challenger space, but then there are times where you absolutely would like to assault 2 locations. So it's situational, but interesting nonetheless. So it does need a Stark King, which I guess is one of the themes we will see in the 3rd card as well, where there was some kind of hope that the 7-cost Rob would see more play. So that's the jury's still out on that one, I guess.
Yeah. This card here, we actually did get a few complaints here and there saying that it wasn't good enough. But if I'm entirely honest, it looked more that it was more not as interesting as some people would have wanted. When you look at the stats alone, it's 6 for 6 Barcon with assault and no attachments except Direwolf, which is something was added quite late. That alone is a good card. With the added bonus of the additional assault, as we've seen with other cards, it's sort of just like icing on top of the cake. That won't always be utilized, but regardless, you've still got a really well-stacked character. The 6-cost slot, especially in Stark, can be utilized quite well. Put it in a Aloof deck with Great Hall, and you've got a lot of cards that can work together at that range. And I think this fits that quite well as well. Might not be better than other 6-cost characters in Stark, but in the deck that it's in decks that it's intended for, I think it does. The no attachments except Direwolf as well. That was a bit of a last-minute decision where I think one of our designers, Diego, who is a big Stark fan, had asked me privately, if that's something we could try to do to encourage those attachments. And at first I was against it, but realistically, I think it adds a nice little, deck building element to it, where you can have, you can chuck in more of those Direwolf attachments that we just don't really see much play of. You see Greywind, the Greywind attachment here and there because it's a good cancel card, but outside of that, there's just not too many that you see. Plus the artwork has Greywind in it, so it's only appropriate to allow for Direwolves.
Yeah, it looks nice. So there was one deck I played I lost to Stark Kohor in the Cottage Dalek that actually played some kind of loop with those Direwolf attachments. There was Nymeria who gives Intimidate, right? and
Yeah.
the Wolf King and stuff like that. The players swapped, right? There was stealth that you needed and not kneeling that you needed at the beginning of challenges, and then Cohort swaps it for intimidate and stuff like that, which was really nice. But
Yeah.
yeah, those are underplayed. And another thing I wanted to say, so Assault, Stark was one of the two factions along with Targaryen, of course, that did not get an 8 cost army with Assault because they already had another 8 cost army from before. And they got a little one with Assault, Brinden's Outriders, that of course cannot target all the locations, but this one, yeah, can at least do that. So it covers that gap basically in Stark that existed.
Yep.
And then we come to a couple of really interesting cards. So we have the Bastards Boys, which to me seems one of the strongest cards in this pack.
Yeah, the boys.
So this one, there was not very late, but it was nerfed a little bit in the design process to say cost 5 or lower. Now that stops. Roose Bolton is, I think, the one notable House Bolton character that had a higher cost. Yeah, but just a bunch of different characters that this can put in, right? Including, I think, someone tested Martell Wolf with this, and Rihanna Martell, the core one, which it's just a loop, right, where they can you can get a chain, I should say, rather, where it's just a big tempo place where one character puts another one in, and this one doesn't need to stand, I should say, to trigger the ability. So you can use it, you can kneel it, you can do a challenge, and then you sack it when it's no longer needed to put something of equal value into play, which I think is really strong.
Yeah, definitely. It has its uses. I was one of the people that play tested that Martell Banner of the Wolf deck, and I actually found a really nice combo with this and Our Blades Are Sharp. I mean, it's not really anything necessarily new, but it was utilizing Bastards Boys, Our Blades Are Sharp. If I had 2 Blades Are Sharp in the discard pile, if I had 1 Blades Are Sharp in a discard pile and 1 in hand, I could constantly reuse these cards. So I would have Bastards Boys in play, use them, sacrifice them to put Ariane Martell into play, then Blades Are Sharp to get the other Blades Are Sharp and Bastard Boys back to hand, then Ariane to put Bastards Boys back into play, and I could sort of redo that. So there is definitely potential combos there. It's not the greatest combo in the world because you're just reusing these 5-cost characters, but it is still there, and you do still have that cost of sacrificing a non-Stark card with Our Blades Are Sharp. But there was something there, and I would love to explore that at some point. This card, it's not really a Stark, really. Like it's Stark, but it's meant for a banner deck. Which I think is fine. The other 2 cards are Stark cards. Yeah.
I think someone actually, or more than one person, complained about that, right? They said, okay, this is not really Stark card so much, but I think Stark badly needs that actually, because they are so stuck in their that one same deck that they always play, right? Or a couple of decks that even have those cards that say, you only if each card you control is Stark or something like that. And this is completely different. This is a banner card, so either banner Wolf or you play Stark banner of something to make this work. And yeah, I think this is a good direction to go. So one thing we didn't say, this could put itself into play, of course, or another copy of the Bastards Boys. But I think the one card, of course, that everyone will immediately think of is Ramsay. He is 5 cost and he's a House Bolton card, and of course he has a if you time him, he has a really annoying little ability.
Yeah. There's a lot that you can do out of this, and if there is a broken combo that's found similar to the one I may have discovered, but not that broken, it might come from this card. I am interested to see what the community makes with this, and if someone can make an efficient House Bolton deck, because we haven't really seen one thus far. We've seen it, here and there. It obviously has great use with something like Harrenhal, the Lannister Harrenhal, of course, where you can, chuck these guys in with Harrenhal, then sacrifice them to put something in permanently. But yeah, I'm interested to see what people do with it, honestly.
Yeah, and for the future, of course, House Bolton. There is currently only one version of Bruce Bolton and one Ramsay, and they are pretty prominent characters. So at some point, okay, the chances are that maybe there will be a higher cost Ramsay or Roose, but if it's 5 cost or lower, could also, of course, work with Bastard's Boys depending on the ability.
Yes, something for the future to keep in mind. Wink, wink.
Okay, and now let's talk about the crack. So it's been what,
Yes.
6 days since the pack came out. Well, 6 days since I did the FAQs here. I think it's 7 days or
Yep.
something, and so many complaints about the crack being overpowered. So we thought you cannot initiate intrigue challenges. So I personally thought that was the horrendous downside that yeah really balanced any kind of positive ability. But seems like people are grabbing 2 power twice per round basically, so 4 power with their Stark Kings, which could be as simple as playing the Wolf King on one of the characters. They're playing Greyjoy, they're playing Alysanne, who doesn't kneel, and it's been successful. Personally, have not played against it, and the one that played in the friendly open the other day did not manage to win. Not sure what the end result was there for that deck, but yeah, seems like this one is going to be strong.
Yeah, this was a card where, similar to some of the other cards, we were really trying to hit a very particular point with this. For thematical reference, this is the Crag is where Robb Stark is injured and Jane Westerling, tends to his wounds and they fall in love. And so that we wanted that very clear downside of, for example, Robb's intrigue game, I guess being, I guess his walls being lowered a little bit, and that inevitably leading to his demise. With the whole marriage situation with Cass Frey. So we wanted that downside in there. And then it was balancing that with a worthy upside, which would encourage 7 cost Rob. Because as you mentioned earlier, we were trying to, make that Rob a little bit more enticing to play. It was finding a fair balance between that. And I think that this is the sort of card where if nobody thinks about it, if nobody tries to account for it in any way, it is going to be overpowered. It is going to be strong. However, there are quite a lot of ways that you can deal with this, especially with the power being on the location itself. It's it might be. I think in the end, the only thing I might regret with this is not ensuring that the Stark King would have to be participating. But it's not really much you can do about that at this point. And that's primarily the downside of that intrigue on those no intrigue challenges, as you mentioned there, was quite seen as quite damaging. But in hindsight, it's more of a deck building decision rather than a downside. So if you can build your deck correctly where you don't actually care too much about intrigue challenges and you just build your deck to be winning military, winning power, then the downside doesn't really exist that much. You can try to defend intrigue if you really want to, but if you just give that up and you lean heavily into the reaction and power challenges, you don't really see it. So that's something that if this does prove to be problematic in a competitive environment, we'll use it as a learning curve. We never get everything 100% right, and time will tell. I think there are options to counter this available, but let's hope that they're enough.
Yeah, I imagine just playing a Game of Thrones, right? That completely ruins the opponent's game, basically, or a round at least. No, you get one round where you're just free from any challenges being initiated against you. I think there are really a lot of answers. If you know you're going to face this deck in a single game, for instance, you can prepare a counter and be pretty confident that you can beat it. But it's just a question whether a deck that you're going to take to a normal tournament where you have to play against everything else is going to have enough counters to account really for this potentially quick power gain. Loyal. So I think it used to be non-loyal, right? Played
Correct,
in playtesting with Khal Drogo as well, and then was changed to loyal just to stop that. So now you need to, if you want two military challenges, you have to work a little bit harder. There is a plot, Storm of Swords, which gives you two military challenges, which is fair enough. It's an underplayed plot, so bringing that into the game is alright. And Relentless Assault as well. Not sure if Stark has any other ways really to exploit that.
Yeah, and it obviously works exceptionally well with Wolf King, as you mentioned before, mainly because that both the king trait and the ability, fit exactly what you want to do with the Crag. So yeah, it's just proving it's just going to be a time will tell situation on whether this becomes too much of a problem.
Okay, and then we move on to Targaryen. Now this one is the opposite case, of course. Targaryen players are notorious complainers. They don't like any of their cards, and they're saying, okay, hero underpowered, not worth it. And it's interesting to me because they have that incredibly strong raiding Khalasar, which just by itself almost all the time gets +1 claim, which is kind of ridiculous. So to get that to stand, especially they also have two military challenges potentially with Khal Drogo, or just use it military, use it power with increased claim, is quite good. But people are unimpressed with hero at the moment, at least.
Yeah, it's another one of those 4/4 Bicons that we were trying to add to each faction, and we are aware that Targaryen, as a bit of a faction identity, they, FFG had a very clear pattern of having very high cost cards, and having very low cost cards, and Targ not having a lot of mid range. So, we were aware that even though we were sort of going against that a little bit with this 4/4 Bicon, but statistically, the card is, if you compare it to every other 4/4 Bicon, and it's hard for me to justify those complaints. It's a similar situation with Sir Gilbert Firing, where it's like you look at it and it's not that exciting. I think it's more that it's not exciting rather than it's not good. A lot of the time, people, and I'm not trying to put anyone down, but a lot of the time I notice that people compare cards of the same stats with the best cards of that stat and say that it's not good enough. When in reality, they're looking at the 1% of cards that are probably too strong, and then completely ignoring the other 99%, which show that this card is either balanced or good. When you compare this to other 4/4s, I feel like it's in that good range. Especially the fact that it also has no attachments except weapons as its base keyword. It's essentially they have to work with the fewer cards theme, which is something we did want to push a little bit more of. It is lacking quite a bit. But outside of that, this was playtested as well, and it seemed decent enough.
Yeah, fewer cards in hand. Basically a negative game state, right, that you're normally trying to avoid. So I get why this is a bit of a mixed, really. You kind of don't want it, but you need it for certain abilities. Works with that army as well, which wants the same thing. I think is it Dothraki Outriders, or is it the other one?
Dothraki Outriders.
No, it's
-1 strength.
It's the other
one. Honor Guard, sorry. Honor Guard. Dothraki Honor Guard. Yeah, you're right, sorry.
Yeah, so this starts extremely strong, 5 for 10, but then gets the inevitable -1 for, let's say, 3-4 cards, something like that. But if you're going with empty hands, it's good. Still no keywords or anything, so not that great. And the traits don't work out for hero, unfortunately. He would be great as a Dothraki, he's not. So that's unfortunate for him. But he is a commander again. Targ with their armies. We've seen Trident. We've seen Trident even with pure Dothraki decks, which is an interesting direction. The art here, so it seems like it's AI, right? And seems like it kind of wanted
Yes.
to copy the image of the actor that plays Grey Worm in the series, I
Yeah,
think.
this was another scenario where it was surprisingly difficult to find any uh, any unsullied art that wasn't Grey Worm.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
There's just nothing. Yeah, and particularly one thing you might notice is the spiked helmets. That's also something that we really needed to get into this artwork. Ideally, we wanted to have Hero himself have the three spiked helmets, which is um, showing that they are. It shows their rank. The more spikes they have on their helmet, you'll notice in um, one of uh, the earlier Grey Worm artwork that I think he has those three spiked helmets. We were trying super hard to get him to that point, but we just couldn't. So yeah, you might notice there's a little bit of similarities there. It's a bit unavoidable with AI art, but we also didn't really have much of a choice. In the end, I'm actually happy with how it turned out, to be honest.
Yeah, and then we have Stalwart Shields, which is
Yeah,
another army, and that's the one I mentioned earlier. So it's an army with an intrigue icon, which is quite
yeah,
rare outside of Martell, and the ability quite simple. So basically robs any opposition army of keywords, including assault, so they can still blank a location, but they won't be able to nil it. And yeah, that's another situational one, right? So it could, let's say you blank Great Ranging, it's not going to like that, but then some other games, nothing to do basically on defense, right?
yeah. It blocks quite a bit. You know, if you find it, you know, blocking a renown, for example, can be game defining. But it's another one of those scenarios where the card on its own, similar to King Rob's host or hero, card on its own is a 3 for 3 Bicon with assault and no attachments. Right, the ability is more of a bonus in itself. When you compare that to other 3 for 3s, it fits that level. Um, and yeah, I think this is something that can definitely be utilized, especially if you want to answer a meta that has a lot of armies, which we know we've sort of pushed for in the last few packs. Um, this is very obviously one of those anti-army cards.
Yeah, not much more to say about this one. And the
Yeah.
next one of my favorite arts in
Yes.
in this pack. Well, actually, the top one actually for me, it's just absolutely beautiful, and it's the Field of Fire. Now this one we had a lot of comments about, and it's a very interesting card. So wants you to play the big dragons. However,
Yes.
uh, the ability, the reward for that, yeah, it's one where time will tell, right? So everyone across the board just gets -1 strength, well, characters without attachments. And I keep thinking you play Blood of the Dragon, and that's already so dangerous with -1 to everyone. But if it's -2 or if it's -3 to everyone, such a huge potential for everything to die, right? So I think this one could be very swingy if it does damage at the right moment in games.
Yeah. Yeah. This has the potential to cause quite a lot of damage. This was, and a lot of people would have seen me mention this in Discord and at some point. This was one of the cards where we wanted to support burn. However, we already understand that the current burn package, we like to call it the classic burn package, is already sort of at its limit, right? It's getting constantly restricted because I think fairly Pyro Danny, 5 cost Danny, with all of the burn attachments is very strong. It's very consistent, is the word I like to use. So we wanted to support this theme, but we thought instead of that, we move into a different direction, one that doesn't encourage the same sort of cards that you usually see. And what better direction than to focus on those 7 cost dragons that are fairly underused for fairly obvious reasons, right? They're too expensive for something like Dracarys, usually. Their abilities are a little bit lackluster, and even though they give the passive boosts to a Stormborn, so to 4 or 8 cost Danny, uh, you can already get that sort of thing with the 3 cost dragons, so or the cheap dragons. So it doesn't really work out there. So we wanted to start to push this new theme, although there are still cards that do encourage this theme, but that just aren't as strong, I would say. We were hoping this was a really good chance to push that and to really focus on this new type of burn. I guess the keyword for this would be, well, the phrase for this new style is low but wide, where usually burn is very singular target, singular and heavy, and Dracarys -4 strength killed if his strength is 0. Meanwhile, this is similar to Blood of the Dragon. It's a passive, it's a widespread low burn. Obviously, it gets larger if you invest more gold into it with the larger dragons. But yeah, I think that this has a lot of potential. I'm completely aware that this is not going to make a 7 cost dragon deck work, but it's the start, and that's the important part. I would love to see more support for the style of deck, and we see a little bit of versatility in our card pool for every theme, burn included.
Yeah, so the Field of Fire, I think, also had several different versions. I think one of them was
Yeah.
kind of like that event. They have the dragon has 3 heads. That works best if you have all 3 dragons in play, which for me was very interesting, but in the end didn't really achieve what it set out to do, right? And also another change was used to trigger at the beginning of the challenges phase, which limited the potential with the 8 cost Daenerys. Also, I think there was a faction card near it, which also conflicts with that, but this version, of course, allows you to do the action of Daenerys to find the dragon, and then you can play the event after to get either to get one dragon that you need or to get an additional dragon. And it's a very interesting choice that players now have which Daenerys to play. So we were thinking, okay, 8 cost works with this. The 7 cost, the core one, which can be used as a bit of a Voltron with all the keywords and stuff, which has insight, is also nice. But actually in the friendly open the other day, the final was played by Targaryen deck that played the Field of Fire with the 5 cost Daenerys, which I guess is not going to be popular. That's still the choice for some decks, but yeah, looks like she's still viable even with this event. Yeah, but you are losing the hatchlings. That's the big thing, right? The hatchlings so cheap to get the Dracarys triggers and stuff, and if not the hatchlings, then the 6 cost Drogon, who himself can just do the big burn on one character, right? That gets you basically double claim and eats through duplicates and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that was honestly one of the biggest challenges with this card. It was trying to design a burn card that is pushing this new direction without it simply being, played with the current burn package, especially with Pyro Danny. And I think we decided that we can't really avoid it. With the way that Pyro Danny works, because this is going to be a Targ event and that's unavoidable, it would always work. So, and it was related to burn, of course. It would always work with Pyro Danny. So we decided to instead make it, as you pointed out, less appealing to play with Pyro Danny because of the 7 cost dragons you're forced to play, which means those Dracarys cards find a whole lot less value. You can obviously still use them with 5 cost Danny herself, but outside of that, you're nearly a 7 gold character, 7 cost character to trigger that Dracarys. It can still work, but it's just we found that we can at least make it inefficient. You're always welcome to do it, but it's inefficient in our mind. Maybe someone will prove that wrong, but realistically, it's the best we could do to support this new theme, along with our Pyro Danny already exists.
And one thing to note, of course, is this works on all characters in play, so you can burn your own as well in on Blood of the Dragon if the deck is not built to survive that. So careful.
All will burn. That's going to be a good time.
And we conclude with Tyrell. So we have
Yes.
Mace Tyrell. They're big named character basically. And this is a commander version of him. Still no military icon, but he is a renowned body and has an ability that, to me, when I read it, seems like if I have to face this, it might be unpleasant. So you're playing armies, and you can use them a little bit to control challenges in a very impactful way, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We wanted to introduce a Mace Tyrell that it showed that, Mace Tyrell, he isn't actually, as the show portrayed him, for example, he's not that useless. He's actually quite a decent commander. And we do see examples of that within the book itself. And so we did want to take an opportunity to showcase, his prowess as a commander. Perfect time to do that as the last army pack. It's a 5/4 Bicon with renown on its own, and the ability itself, it's got plenty of uses, really. It's not always going to be relevant, but if your deck is built correctly, it likely will be relevant.
Yeah, so the very cheap armies that you could just use to pay the cost in Tyrell, not so accessible. There is one coming up in this pack. But also this is quite versatile. If you do a big attack and the opponent doesn't bother to defend, you can even basically stand two of your own characters. So one as cost and one as the effect, and doesn't really hurt you, right? So it works that way. But if you really need to win a challenge, just removing one character, okay, there is some targeting restriction. But let's say you do one of your big armies. There's High Guard and Honor Guard has a pretty big printed cost, but comes in basically for free in some decks, right? So it's not a big deal to, if you want to remove something big, you can do that reasonably well. There is a limit. I think without a limit, he would be pretty crazy. It could be pretty obnoxious control effect, but I think he's decent and has to be to compete with the other two maces, right? I think they're all pretty playable and will be interesting to see, especially that Randall Tarly deck with lots of armies has use for the 6-cost mace as well, so we'll see which one wins out.
Yeah, we knew that this would compete with the other maces, but I did make one thing quite clear, that it's very obvious that this mace isn't fitting the same style as the other two, really. It's maybe the 6-cost mace can work with someone like Randall Tarly, putting stuff on top of the deck. But other than that, this one's doing a very different thing. So even though he does have to compete with those other slots, in most cases you're not really, choosing between different maces. It's if the deck is army focused, this mace is going to just flat out going to be better. One thing I wanted to note as a bit of from the art side of this, I was shocked and very surprised to see that there is actually not that much Mace Tyrell art up there. At least not that's just straight from the show itself. That we had to AI generate this one, and I mean it looks great. I think it's quite menacing. But that was just, a little note that I was very surprised. No one seems to want to draw Mace Tyrell, it seems, at their own free will. I don't know.
Yeah, it looks great. I think all the AI cards basically... Okay, I complained about Hero earlier, but yeah, most of them look amazing, really.
Yeah, the art team did great.
And then we have, this one, Old Town City Watch, not my favorite art, and the layout basically of this one. So we have the text and then lots of empty space. There's just no good flavor text, I think, for this one. Old Town City Watch.
We tried.
Yeah. So the ability, very simple one. Okay, it's not passive, it's triggered, but just comes into play, reveals top card of each player's deck. Now that might do nothing, or it might give you, of course, information. Tyrell needs it, needs Old Town triggers, needs Mark Mullendor and stuff like that. Randall Tarly triggers if they're not blind, of course. or the spy character that increases strength based on the top card, stuff like that. So useful. It's not super cheap, it's not a 2-coster, but at 3 costs still pretty affordable. So I think as a generic character, this one pretty decent for Tyrell.
Yeah, but with this one here, we went. This one was like focused on quite a bit early. We went through a lot of different versions and a lot of discussion based on where this should be, and we ended up landing on something that would focus on a very straightforward reaction, as you can see here. But more specifically, it's more about the stats and the traits that this has. So 3 for 3 Bicon, mill power is always great. But then the army, more specifically the army and the House Hightower traits. Army, obviously being a unique army for Mace Tyrell here, is quite useful, especially 3 cost or lower. It's good to stand and remove that, to stand and remove another 3 cost or lower. And the House Hightower trait, we wanted something else that was available for I've forgotten the name of it, sorry. The House Hightower event we released in Hear My Words.
I want to say we light the way or something like that.
Yeah, we light the way. That's the one. Just giving another option for that, another House Hightower traded card for that to work. Not a very direct synergy, but more just we wanted this card to provide a few more options just with its raw stats, and we didn't want to overcomplicate it. It was a shame we couldn't find flavor text though. I do agree that I don't like massive blank space like that.
Not as bad as old Steward though, so still fine.
Yeah.
And actually, the one that always bothered me, it's an FNG card from Tyrell. It's the Arbor. Looks so empty to me. Just says limited, right? And then the modifier. It desperately needed something in between to me.
Yeah, true.
So I just had a quick look at the armies that exist in the game. So as you can see with Tyrell, we have some pretty high cost armies here, and the lowest they had was cost 4. So this is the cheapest one they have for their army stuff that they could potentially do. So should be welcome for them. And then we have
well, I was gonna say similar to Lannister, we also wanted to introduce a commander, and we also identified that they could use a cheaper army in the same manner that Lannister could. I just hope that it doesn't get too problematic with the 7 cost Randall that we already know is quite a problem in certain decks.
And we conclude with Highgarden Sept. Now this one is a little bit more complicated. Has 2 abilities. Has a passive that if you have a massive hand, which you might have, none of the 7 characters cannot enter play during the challenges phase, which can be tricky because Tyrell, of course, is one of the factions that has the most of these jumpers that would come into play during the challenges phase, and they're not, or almost none of them are the 7 characters. And there is the reaction, which draws you a card after power is gained by or moved to the 7 card you control. So that's limit once per phase, which means in the challenges phase where this is likely to happen, you will draw 1, which to me is not enough. So if you want to use this, you need to do it twice, right? And it can be done, of course. I think it works with the Starry Sept, moving power on your own character, let's say in marshalling, to give you an extra card. That should work. And Sparrows coming in from Shadows also will trigger this, but it kind of needs the 7 deck, which in Tyrell at the moment is not a thing, but could be at some point.
Yeah, this is very obviously one of our anti-shadow cards that we wanted to introduce, and thematically, I personally love that it's working with if you have 7 or more for the 7 card. That was quite convenient. We sort of did accidentally, and then we realized. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like Tyrell the 7, sorry, isn't really prevalent right now. But we wanted to start to slowly add more options for that. Realistically, if we can introduce some more cards that synergize with this, synergize with other the 7 themes that they do already have, they're just sort of all over the place. Then we can start to see a new theme build in Tyrell, and that's always what we want to do. We want to leave paths open for new themes, because otherwise we just keep recycling the same cards. So hopefully this can start one of those new paths.
Yeah, and that's a good note to end on here. So that was the 30th card. Well, actually, it's we
24th, yeah.
didn't we didn't do it in the correct order, but yeah, it's the last one we looked at. And yeah, so to me, I have a really let's say a positive expectations about this pack. Even looking at the cards here on DronesDB, it looks so much more colorful than all the brown stuff we had for as high as honor. So really looking forward to seeing them in action. So what's your general thoughts? Do you think we got this one right?
I feel like we did, at least compared to as high as honor. I feel like this one was more balanced. For example, and this was more of a last minute tweak. For example, one of the things that I mentioned was high as honor, where I felt like the strengths were just one too low. That actually came into account here, and I thought we better learn from that. King's Landing Mob, for example, was 4 for 3, but then we revisited that and decided that for something that's got a kill cost, it can probably be 4 for 4, and it's probably still a fair card. And I think that was the correct decision. Time will tell if that's the case, but that's what it feels like after seeing it all done now. So I feel like we did a little bit better with this one. And as long as we keep on, similar with the Crag, as long as we keep on learning from, mistakes or learning from things we didn't get right, then I'm happy with any mistakes that we do make. And I think we try to strive for that in the design team.
Yeah, I think all the factions surely will find at least something useful for them here. One of the three cards, if you're a faction loyalist, has to appeal to you in some way with this one. Yeah, so yeah, we can do our usual choices, right? See what our favorite cards are here. It's a tough one for me. Do you have a clear favorite?
I would say that surprisingly, I think one of my clear favorites is actually Salador Sans Lysini. I really love how that turned out. I don't usually play Smuggler myself, but I might genuinely give it a go after seeing this card and what it can do. I surprisingly I like the Martell cards, but I don't think any of them are stand out as my favorite. Not like a Trader's Whisper from Aspire's Honor. That they're all just decent cards that I will use at some point. But if the one that stands out as my favorite, it's definitely Subtle Suns Lysini.
Yeah, for me, in the previous pack I kind of disliked Baratheon cards, so I chose something from Lannister. This time I don't dislike them, but I'm not sure. Dragonstone is the one that, as a Baratheon player, I'm most looking forward to exploring now. As I said earlier, I don't think it's ready. There's something missing, but I think in a year's time or so, when new cards are released, I'll look back at this and probably think that this was a great card to release. So I think I'll stick with that. I'll choose Dragonstone here, even though the next time we do a pack review, I'm probably going to say that I've not used it successfully. But yeah, so what? I think it's great.
If I'm talking about any cards that I'm looking forward to in the future, especially similar to what you said there with Dragonstone getting future support, there's two that I can definitely point out. One of them being Field of Fire, and I would actually say that's probably also one of my favorite cards of this pack, just because I love what it's doing. But I'm looking forward to how it's going to be supported in the future. But also the Trident. I'm so excited about that card, and I know that it's purposely not going to be super impactful right now, but I'm excited for the future of that card and seeing a theme there with those potential forks that we're looking to create.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, if I had to choose my favorite art of this spec, I was going to say the Field of Fire, followed closely by the Trident. I think those are the two most beautiful we had here. So
Yes.
yeah,
The artist for the Trident it's an interesting story there. I had tried to get in contact with that artist for as high as honor with I think it was the High Road potentially. or no, it was the High Road, and they just didn't respond to me. And so I tried one more time with Spoils of War, and they actually did respond, which is funny enough. So it's one of those artists where now after you can, it sort of shows you how long it takes to get artists to respond and get their feedback on things. That it took two entire pack cycles to get this artist to finally contact us, and I think it paid off. His artworks are wonderful.
All
Yeah.
right, and what else? So one more I wanted to say that I like here. So former champion is one that I think I will be using in some decks as a neutral card. So that's definitely on my list as well. But yeah, let's discuss the other side. So anything problematic? So far we've not been too successful with these choices, especially for the 5 cost strongholds. That was a real disaster, right? We thought Great Pyramid would be the worst, the most problematic. I mean, yeah. So that was a complete miss. And last time we were not so successful. But what about this one? So we have a few candidates, right? So we have the Crag already has complaints. We have potentially Cargo has an impactful
Yeah.
ability. Bastards Boys efficient. The
Yeah.
Field of
War
Fire,
Scorpions with
yeah.
with MFG, Field of Fire. Yeah.
Trident maybe as well. So which one stands out? If you had to make a bet, which one will be in time
My
the strongest?
I think my bet is going. I'm going to go for the Crag here. Um, I think that it can potentially get to a point where it's too quick for even an opponent with counters in their deck to counter. Um, but I also, frequently underestimate how good some people can be at meta calling. So I think it can be the most problematic, but at the same time, I also think it's one of the cards that can be countered the most here in what it's doing.
Yeah, I'll mention the Field of Fire again here. So I can imagine, maybe not now, but at some point, there's going to be a deck that it's just impossible to play against because there's a constant every character close to zero and either can do anything or is going to be burned if it's put into any challenge, and it's just going to be such an impossible obstacle. I think that will happen at some point, that this card will become disliked, but maybe not in the very near future. We'll see.
Yeah, and yeah, of course we'll see that. I would, if there's ever a day where we see 3 of the 7 cost dragons and 7 cost Drogon wipes an entire board, I will be a little bit happy because you haven't seen that ever happen. And if we've pushed a theme to allow that to happen, and if it's problematic, then we'll deal with that later. But if I ever see that, I will be kind of happy.
Not really a dark player, and this is so not my cup of tea. These big dragons, but I feel like I have to play this at some point. It's just such a beautiful card, and so many pessimists about it that kind of want to prove them wrong, right? I think
Oh yeah,
I'll have a
yeah,
go at some point.
yeah.
Okay, and I think that's all we had for the Spoils of War. Of course, we can have a look at the future as well, like we always do. So as you can see, there's nothing on Thrones DB for number 26, but doesn't mean the game is ending. Of course, there are plans, right, Steven?
Yes, we always have plans, and I can't really show too much thus far. Personally, I'm taking a little bit of a break after uh, Wars of War, and then getting back into likely a larger project. Where we're going to have to change up quite a few things, but we are. I guess what I can say is that we are looking to uh, work with cycles again, similar to what FFG has done, in hopes that we can start a process and refine a process where we can get smaller packs released a lot quicker. Because that's one thing that there's constant improvements we're trying to make. As I mentioned in Spoils of War, we've tried to focus on simplicity, which I think we mostly achieved. Or at least I hope we did. Uh, and I think the next thing we want to start to improve or focus improvement on is um, you know deadlines and timelines. And I think setting up this it'll take longer to start because there's a lot we do have to actually change in our general process and how we actually work in the design team to account for let's say like 120 cards being tested at once. It's a big task. It's a big feat, which is partly why, as I said, I'm taking a little bit of a break first to be ready for that. But I also believe, or we also believe, once we get into a routine where we understand how we can do it and we've improved it and we're good to go, it will just we'll start seeing packs released a whole lot quicker. And that's the hope, and hopefully that'll we'll be able to provide more for the community a lot sooner. Um, and yeah,
Yeah, so there are some pros and cons, of course, with that kind of system. With the FFG era, of course, when a pack was released, you could just go to your local store and grab it. Now, of course, there's a bit more time between pack being released and you actually getting the physical cards, right? You need to order them, and there's shipping costs and stuff like that. Where smaller packs that you need to buy more often are not that great. But on the other hand, I think those huge waiting times between expansions, when there is basically stagnation, right? For a living card game is a minor disaster sometimes. Even in the FFG times, when there was a break between cycles, sometimes for a couple of months, you could feel that stagnation sometimes, where there was nothing coming in. And yeah, having more frequent releases, certainly that huge period between Brand Builder and As High as Honor didn't help.
Yep.
And getting cards quicker. And 120 is such a nice number, right? You can do so much with it. If you need to change plans, it works out as 6 packs of 20, works out as 4 packs of 30 or 3 packs of 40 cards or something like that. And we did 60 cards
Yep.
as well in the past, which I think we won't be tackling again. It's too much of a project.
Well,
But in theory,
if we
we
if
could.
if we if we do tackle it, it will be more specifically an expansion, like something large, similar to what FFG did. But yeah, it won't be something we would. I don't think it's something that we want to do frequently. I think we want to try to, as I said, this first attempt at a cycle, it will be rocky, it will be bumpy, and I know that. But it's also going to be a great learning experience for everyone involved. And once we do get it right, it should really benefit everyone.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping we can do that.
Yeah, probably it's not going to be like we see here listed cycle. Then we have 6 expansions in order. I guess the starting point would be just to have 120 cards, right? And then you release them in the order that you can. So if there's artwork available for some, you push them forward, right? And
Exactly.
if some are more ready
Yeah.
to be released. And I think FFG actually, I was not a playtester, but I think they kind of did the same, right? They play tested the whole cycle, 120
Yeah.
cards, and it also helps with some
Yeah.
design, right? When you have cards like the Trident to get the bigger picture, basically, for those cards. Sometimes
Definitely.
can help.
Yeah. 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 And we already have. Again, this is. I can't really give much detail because we haven't. It's not ready to start testing yet. We're still figuring out a lot of the details, but we have like a preliminary list of those 120 cards, which, as you can probably imagine, it takes a while. It's taken quite a few separate, sessions. I think Richard and I have gone through 6 or 7 calls now. To no, it's been 8 because it was one per faction plus neutrals altogether. Uh, yeah, we went through 8 calls, I think, to get this current list, and we still have to go through and review everything one more time at least. Um, and yeah, there's a lot of suggestions. There's a lot to go through. So as I said, it'll be a bumpy ride to start, but then hopefully we get in a routine that can crank out these packs a lot sooner.
Yeah, looking forward to that personally. If there's 12 cards per faction that you can see coming, there should be kind of something for everyone, right? Something for every team as well, which is going to be great. So
Yeah,
happy
and
to
I
see those cards listed here at some point in the near future.
yeah, I think importantly as well, it also leaves card slots open for cards that are similar to what we saw with the Spoils of War, where cards that are less exciting. You have room for those cards because those cards are alongside other cards that are more exciting. And even though I don't like to think that just because a card isn't exciting, it isn't good. There's a lot of cases where non-exciting cards are actually very useful for the theme that it's trying to boost. And so having more slots, 12 slots per faction available, gives us opportunity to have those necessary cards that aren't super impactful, but still need to be there.
Okay, and I think that's all we had on this subject. Anything else you can think of, Steven, or should we conclude this? So there is one last thing I want to talk about before we end,
Yeah.
but if you have anything on the packs that you
No,
think.
no, go ahead. I'm sure people will hear more about the following cycle not very soon, but in due time.
All right, so one last thing I wanted to do was to invite everyone to take part in the upcoming 8 Regents tournament. So there was a huge demand to have this tournament held again in 2023 after it was so popular last year, and registration is now open for this year's event, and I really would like to see most of the community there. It's such a fantastic event, and we had so much fun. Steven and I were, of course, teammates in the Bara team, so it's going to be so much fun seeing where we end up this year. And
Yeah.
the new cards, of course, even though some may not be played competitively, that particular tournament kind of invites you to play a bunch of weird combinations because you have to play all of the agendas. So we'll see most of the cards in action in that event, and on my channel I'll try to show you some recordings or even stream some games live, and I will post the sign up link in the description of this video as well, so hopefully you can all join us.
Yeah, I'm super excited for it. I know last time, as everyone knows, I'm usually a Martell player, but I wasn't actually too concerned. I just got to join in on a fun tournament, and we had a lot of fun as Team Baratheon. I have a feeling I probably won't be on the same team. I'll probably just be chucked on whatever team needs a spare person. I'm not that well renowned everywhere, but I'm okay. Uh, so if we're not on the same team, that's all right. But we'll always have the memory of winning together the first tournament.
Yeah, definitely, and a lot of us actually met up at Stalek last year to do
Yeah,
a mini celebration. Okay, it wasn't anything big, but it's nice to meet some of the teammates that I didn't know personally before Stalek last year. So I think that's all we have for you in this video. So once again, Steven, I think this is the 4th time we've done this review, and actually this time I think it's a record low number. We managed to keep it under 3 hours. It's 2 hours 43 in the recording, but
yes,
still about 10 minutes to cut out, I think. So this is the shortest one, and I guess I'll get that 6 hours of sleep that I wanted after all.
Next time I'll wake up on time. No one knows this, but I may have slept through like 2 or 3 alarms for this.
Yeah, it's a bit awkward.
That's
Steven
good.
has to get up at 6:30, right? And for me, it's now 2 a.m. So yeah, that's kind of the time difference we are working with here.
But it's worth it for the only game that matters, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so thanks a lot for doing it. Always good to have you as a guest.
Always. Yeah, and thank you for everything you do. I appreciate that. So.
Yeah, absolutely my pleasure, and hopefully we can do it again next time. And of course, to all of our viewers, thanks for joining us, and hopefully see you all in 8 regions.